Honorable members, you're welcome to the meeting. Let me take the opportunity to welcome the chairpersons of entities led by the deputy ministers and the officials of the department and both of those entities that we are interacting with today. I'm going to ask that we observe a moment of silence for meditation or prayer before we start with our meeting. Thank you very much. Can we recognize the apologies? Yogazi?
Yes, Chair. Good morning, members. The acting DG won't be able to attend the meeting today. And Ms. Buthelezi won't be able to attend. And I've been told Ms. Matseke also sent an apology. I've got those 3 apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. I suppose the meeting agrees with the apologies. Honorable Mhlala?
Yes, thank you so much. I hear Vyogas saying that she heard or she's been told. Why this? I don't know how are these people doing their apologies. If she's not confirming to us that I've received an apology of Mr. Tseke, she's been told by who? Thank you.
Mr. Eke, it's from me. I said Mr. Eke sent the communique to my phone that they've got the privilege and what is it? Privilege, members privilege and committee. So you know that today we're meeting, but it's clashing is the day that other committees are meeting. So I don't know, Vyogas, why is the apology didn't reach Vyogas, but she has sent me that information as the chair. So that is the agenda, honorable members. We have invited the 3 entities who are going to allow them, Vyogas, all of them to present, and members ask questions later on, so that we don't eat any time for any other entities. So I'm going to allow the department led by the DM to, as he leads the delegation, to acknowledge the chairs that are here and then hand it over to them. We'll then have, as appear on the agenda, we'll have the Water Research Commission, and then we have Trans-Caledon Tunnel, and then we have Inkomati-Usuthu Catchment Management Agencies. If they are chairs, they are here, all of them. we'll start with the one for the Water Research Council, and then the CEO present, and then we allow the second one to present, and then the third one, and then we interact with all the presentations simultaneously, so that we give all the entities enough time. DM Mahlobo, can I get members to support the agenda, all the presentation, and then question, clarification, and inputs after all the presentation? Honorable Mbana.
Thank you, Chair. I think let's agree, and I would like to adopt the agenda as amended by you. I think there's nothing that we can do except to get all the presentation, and then we note the concern and questions. Thanks, Chair. Move for the adoption.
Thank you very much, Honorable Mbana. Can I get the seconders?
I do, Chair.
Honorable Masheo, second.
Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much, Honorable Masheo. And let me allow the DM Mahlobo to present these entities. DM Mahlobo.
Well, thank you very much, Your Excellency, Honorable Chairperson, Ms. Menya, and to members of our esteemed portfolio committee. Chairperson, we have the leadership of our three entities, the Water Research Commission led by the Chair and the CEO. And equally, we also have our Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority, also led by the Chairperson and CEO. And then lastly, we have Inkomati-Usuthu Catchment Management Agency. Inkomati-Usuthu Catchment Management Agency, they are led by the acting chair. The leadership will recall that we had one of our members of the board was the chairperson who departed during this period, and we have an acting chair. And equally, in the administration, they are led by the acting CEO, because the CEO at the time, the doctor, has left the institution. Those are the three institution chairperson led by both at an accounting authority level and executing authority level by the leadership there. And we are very pleased, Chair, to indicate that when you took your meeting last week as a portfolio committee, you had a sense of their financial performance, the three entities. When the Office of the Auditor General of South Africa made the presentation, and all the entities have done well. And in the main, we also want to congratulate TCTA because the last time the audit opinion was not good. It was a qualification, including the water trading entity in the department. But at least now, there's been a lot of improvement after we went through your support. Without then any further ado, Your Excellency Chair, we will request that we allow the leadership of the Water Research Commission. They will guide us as you have guided us, that the chair will start then, and then the CEO will also come in to make that presentation, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you very much, TM. Chair of Water and Water Research Commission, you're welcome, and with your team. You have 30 minutes, both you and the CEO, to present. You're
And
welcome.
thank you very much.
My apology, Chair. Just to indicate that apart from the leadership of the various entities led by the chairs, the department is also here, those that are responsible for institutional oversight, so that if there are any other issues that need to be clarified on the performance of the three institutions, who are also going to come in as a shareholder, Your Excellency Chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you, TM Mahlobo. Chair.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair of the committee and honorable members of the Portfolio Committee and Honorable Deputy Minister, officials of the department and colleagues. Firstly, I would like to thank the Portfolio Committee for giving us the opportunity to present the WRC's annual performance for 2019-2020. I'll let the CEO, Desigan Naidu, do the presentation, and our CFO will assist with regards to the AFS. I think I'll just respond when questions come. So it's over to you, Mr. Naidu.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, Chairperson of the committee, and greetings, Deputy Minister, the chair and members of the committee, and all of the colleagues from the department and the entities. With your permission, Chair, we're going to do the presentation slightly differently today to make the maximum use of the time you have given us. We're going to first play a short video, which will be an overview of the annual report and the performance for that year, the year 2019-20. And then we're going to supplement that with going through some of the slides as part of that full presentation that you have already received to emphasize a few of the issues, but we will be finished in the time that you have allocated. So with your permission, Chair, I am going to continue, and I'm going to start off first with the first thing that I want to present. Firstly, okay.
For nearly 5 decades, the Water Research Commission, also known as the WRC, has served as South Africa's premier funder of water and sanitation-related research that is recognized globally. During 2019-2020, the WRC has continued to play its important role as a water sector knowledge hub by ensuring that its research and innovation products contribute to the improvement of sustainable water and sanitation services for all South Africans.
The 2019-20 year has been most interesting. Just when we thought we could have a sigh of relief getting over the prolonged drought on the one hand and the unrest in the higher education sector on the other, in the fourth quarter we were plunged into the global COVID-19 pandemic. And as a responsible science and technology institution, we took our place in the fight against the COVID pandemic, launching a series of information sheets to empower people around how to deal with it, and a series of COVID-19 related science-based webinars aimed at sharing knowledge and exploring effective solutions and mechanisms to supplement the government-led measures for mitigating against the spread of the virus. The Commission also launched, pivotally, the COVID-19 wastewater surveillance program with sector partners early on in this current financial year, including the universities, the NICD, the WHO, and of course the Department of Health. Our performance highlights include the fact that the WRC initiated 92 new projects in the various disciplines in water and sanitation in the WRC. And over the past 5 years, together with this very productive community of practice, which is currently rated in the top 20 in the world, we completed 480 research projects, ensuring a continuous contribution of new knowledge to the sector. The studies include microplastics and their occurrence in water sources, including freshwater sources, organizing to utilize human waste in a much smarter way, for example, through the biobricks made from human urine, and projects that guide the implementation of safe water reuse in our municipalities to increase water security. During this year, the WRC projects led to 44 new innovations, technologies, or services that could be used. And we further invested in 18 other innovations to take them past the initial stage, proof in laboratory, and out into the market. The innovations are evaluated through smart programs like SASTEP, and this is in partnership with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation as part of the global program of Reinvent the Toilet. And we want to fast track the adoption of the innovations and emerging sanitation technologies in South Africa, in Africa, and the world. Another pivotal program is called WADA, done in partnership with the Department of Science and Innovation, to evaluate the products that are coming from various bases to better prepare them for the open market. We, as always, have a very strong emphasis on building research capacity in South Africa and supporting several related capacity building initiatives, such as hackathons and youth events. The WRC in the 2019-20 year supported 362 students in their studies, and I'm happy to say that 344 of them were in the master's and PhD domain. We also spend a lot of effort to train and mentor new research leaders, and have had tremendous success in this regard. As we sit, we have been able to demonstrate in the 19-20 year that 60% of the research leaders on the new projects were in fact from the designated groups, and most younger than 50 years old. And this is an important part of the transformation. In addition, we place a lot of emphasis on organizing for communities not just to be the subjects of research, but to be active participants in this. And in the 19-20 year, we had 109 projects that were community-based. And these included a variety of disciplines, including successful food gardens in schools and good measures, new toolboxes for emerging farmers to become more sustainable and successful. One of the highlights was the conclusion of the multi-use water schemes project, and this was done in the Vembe district in Limpopo. It impressed the African Development Bank, one of our key partners in this project, so much that they now want to replicate this in every single country on the African continent. Now, a key part of what we do is to make sure that the knowledge we generate actually gets out there for people to be able to use. To assist this, we had 18 dialogues in the year, 2 summits, and 28 workshops, maintaining and enhancing our status as South Africa's hub for water-centered knowledge.
The WRC hosted its 4th biennial symposium in September 2019, themed Innovation in Every Drop. The symposium was a great success, and it attracted the largest number of participants since its inception in 2011. The symposium provided a platform for learning, sharing, engagement for policymakers, researchers, innovators, and funders. The WRC has made great strides towards growing its international partnerships. A highlight in this regard was the development of the WRC African Engagement Strategy to ensure value add and positioning of WRC as a key African knowledge and innovation partner. Engagements were initiated with key African partners to explore and form knowledge and innovation partnerships. to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and beyond.
And two pivotal African partnerships that we've had this year is with the African Academy of Sciences and with WaterNet.
The WRC managed to maintain its financial sustainability, as reflected in its positive net asset position of some 121 million as at the end of 2019-20. The water research levy, which is collected from various water users, continues to be the WRC's main source of revenue, accounting for some 76% of its overall revenue during the year under review. The WRC augments this income through leverage income. During 2019-20, this amounted to some 65 million, almost 24% of gross revenue. Of the 176 million RDI investment during the year, about 70% relates to research and development, while 30% is applied to projects focusing on innovation and impact, including demonstrations of new solutions. The WRC has reported a 38 million surplus, and this results firstly from generating some 14 million more leverage income than initially anticipated. This was also due to some key deliverables being produced earlier than planned and through 6 million expenditure savings.
The WRC is proud to say that it has yet again achieved an unqualified audit from the Auditor General of South Africa. The WRC remains South Africa's foremost funder of water research.
Thank you, Chairperson, and I hope that was clearly audible and visible on your side. What I'd like to do now.
Yes, very clear, and yeah, it was very clear, CEO. You can proceed.
Thank you very much. Ma'am, what I'd like to do now, very quickly, is just walk through the presentation that was sent to you. You will see that a lot of it, the majority has actually been covered in the video, but there are just one or two things that I want to emphasize around the issues that the committee has raised in the past, and then I will conclude. So I'm going to very briefly share with you the presentation, and I hope you can see that. And as I said, I'm going to go quite quickly through some of the slides because they have been covered. So these first couple of slides have been covered quite well in the video. I just want to remind the portfolio committee that we work in 6 baskets of impact, and these are really important, and they become quite fundamental and indeed quite pioneering in the water sector, water research and innovation sector globally, as many of our partners in the Global Water Research Coalition are now starting to adopt a similar paradigm. And just to remind you that empowerment of communities very directly and transformation and redress are very high on the agenda. We do build capacity in the sector, primarily at the postgraduate level, but the knock-on effect of that, of course, is quite obvious to folk. There are new products and services for economic development and social development that continuously come out of the WRC and its partners. We like to think that we strongly inform decision-making and policy-making. Of course, it's a complicated process. Sometimes the advice is taken very directly and there is implementation. At other times, it seeds a process that requires a different point for that implementation. And our business is very firmly in the sustainable development solutions domain. We don't do anything outside that. You are familiar now with the organizational structure of the WRC and how we operate. And the thing I really want to emphasize is that we invest very strongly in the multiplier effect. And this is reflected in the performance tables. And we manage to organize for every single rand of investment in research and innovation to have a multiple effect, hopefully a leverage of 5 to 10 times that in various spheres. And this is something we managed to maintain in this 2019-20 year. Now, it's a bit strange talking about it in 2021 because we've just been through a pandemic year and life has been very different. And if you like, much of the 2019 calendar year was the last time we remembered an old normal. So what you're seeing is a mix of that. But in the last quarter already of that financial year, we were already inside the pandemic, and I will emphasize some of those issues. Just overall, the primary indicators in the APP for the WRC is 38. We have achieved on all of those. 20 of them in excess of what was required, and one of them that was achieved differently. It wasn't unachieved, it was achieved differently. And this was in the domain of the students that we support. We overshot the target, which is great, but we put much more emphasis into the domain that directly relate to our projects, and that's around masters, PhDs, and postdocs. And one of the results of that is that there were fewer honors and other students that could be supported because the primary playing field for the WRC is in the postdoctoral domain. Just to emphasize that the strategic partnerships are in different packages. Now, you heard during the presentation about the African Development Bank and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and there are many other very big international players that we are playing with. Started off some time ago, had some emphasis in the 2019 year. We have a bigger emphasis in the 2020 year. But just to say that some of those are in the domain of research, but they're a minority. The majority now, like the Gates one, is in the domain of converting that research into impact and practical application on the ground. And the Gates work is a very good example of that in the sanitation domain, which is where we're playing with them. And in the African Development Bank, you heard around the multi-use systems. A second package of partnerships that we're working with are in the domain of education, but education not only in the direct way of curriculum development and student development and research development, but going beyond that. One new example is around developing infrastructure in the SACHI model, and this is done with the NRF and the Department of Science and Innovation. And the primary funding, in fact, comes from the Department of Environment in South Africa. And this is something that's going to last. It works for 5 years at a time, but in general, the SACHI chairs go through 3 terms. So this, if you like, is a 15-year investment in new knowledge inside the system through the SACHI chairs. And then with education, over and above the work that we do together with the Department of Water and Sanitation in programs like Vision 2020, which has great accolades for South Africa. We're also into the domain of school infrastructure. And the presidential SAFE program, Sanitation for Education program, is one of our primary investments about ensuring all of the schools eventually in South Africa has sustainable sanitation. Another domain is dealing with the crises inside the system. And in the 2019 year, we were still getting over the drought period, and that tended to be dominant. But of course, as we went to the end of the financial year, we went into the domain of the COVID and the health crisis that we've had. Just a few things around the project highlights, and you've seen some very good things in the video presentation, but it's about big things and small things that make a big difference. So an additional example to what you saw in the video is that we have, together with the Agricultural Research Commission, as well as the Department of Education, started to work on school gardens. And we already have had very, very good successes inside this domain. And what we have found in those school gardens, as you would expect, that the schools, being the center of their communities, organized to have a knock-on effect in those communities themselves, as we see in this example. On the policy and decision-making domain, there are various very good examples in this domain. One that will involve the portfolio committee in great detail in the years to come, I am sure, is around how we revolutionize sanitation in this country. And this is not only about the front end of the new toilets, but it's also about the back end and how you beneficiate the waste. And one major planning tool that has been introduced into the system is something called the SFD or the sanitation flow diagrams. And we're working together with municipalities under the umbrella of SALGA to organize for this to become a mainstay planning tool for sanitation in the country as a whole. And we are very hopeful that this is going to... Sorry, Shay, it seems like someone's unmuted, but let me continue. The other domain is the 4IR, and the 4IR in water is absolutely critical. And now we're investing a lot more together with some new partners, like the South African National Space Agency, around remote sensing as both a planning tool on the one hand, but also as a monitoring and evaluation tool on the other. Transformation and redress, absolutely top of the agenda. And this is something we invest quite strongly, as you have seen in some of the statistics. And organizing for alternative sources of water, and groundwater is a very big part of that, is also a very big part of what we are starting to do. More products and services for the economy, organizing for more crop per drop, and improving on farming irrigation is something that is top of mind, and we've had some very, very good successes in this domain. And we've managed to start a virtual irrigation academy, because we need to reach out and empower not only emerging farmers, they're critically important, but also existing farmers, because existing farmers need to make a vital switch into organizing for more productive agriculture on the back of better water management, better crop management, new varieties of crops, etc. And this is something that we've had some very good successes in the 2019-20 year, and these are two of the examples that are in front of you. And then driving sustainable development solutions. We're going into the spaces around the hotspots to make sure that wastewater, the wastewater nightmares that we are currently facing, become a thing of the past very soon, on the back of the research that we have done, on the back of the innovation that can be offered into the sector. And at the same time, we're starting to deal with the new pollutants. And these are becoming more and more significant in every month, every year. Enhancing human capital, and we're doing this, I want to say, in two broad spaces. One is around developing education and the capacity building of people in the domain of practitioners and research, but also we're starting to work a lot more as the WRC in supporting the development of entrepreneurs, because the industrialization of the sector is still really critical. We have expressed this in the 2017 IPAP as government, and this is something that we are continuing to empower with our work. One of the very big conferences that we had during the 2019 year, in addition to our symposium, was the SER, the Ecological Restoration Conference. So the SER, the Society of Ecological Restoration, which operates in most countries in the world, had chosen to have their 2019 Congress in South Africa. On the symposium itself, members of the committee, the deputy minister, and many of the colleagues were participants in that event that we had in Sandton. The issue around organizing for agriculture to get up to a much higher level is something that we're working a lot on, but I want to emphasize that we're also looking at new and novel mechanisms around how this happens. And then organizing for extension to be organized institutionally within the NERISA is something we've been supporting, and then building up the notion of the agri-parks. And I have to say that one of the bigger efforts that we've been putting into the system in the last couple of years has been in the water, energy, food nexus. The water, energy, food nexus is going to determine what the limitations are and what the solutions are for our development pathway going into the future. And there's phenomenal new work in that domain. And perhaps if the committee is interested, like we had a special session on desalination recently, we can also organize for a special session on the water, food, energy nexus when you are available. Chair, I just want to put the numbers back on the screen. You've seen this on the video, that we are demonstrating transformation in the cohorts inside the research projects. And I think we're moving in a very, very good direction. both in terms of race representation as well as gender representation. And one of the things that's emerging that is really, really useful is we're having youth leadership in our research projects themselves. It's a very interesting area. And as we said in the video, we now have the majority of project leaders being under 50 in the WRC. We are not discarding the old people who sit with huge repositories of knowledge. They've in fact very generously become part of the mentorship arrangements in the WRC around these projects. I must emphasize that one of our key set of partners inside the sector are, of course, the other entities. The water boards, the TCTA, the CMAs have become primary partners with great acceleration in the 2019 year, and it continues to today around not only the valorization of the research into implementation, but also in the research itself, which is going extraordinarily well. Chair, I just wanted to share with the Portfolio Committee that our regional representation of projects is something we pay a lot of attention to. There are no provinces where there aren't active projects currently, and this is a representation of what was there in the 2019-20 year. And you can see the representation is quite strong. We also have to point out that the WRC and its partners, the 3,000 or so researchers from the universities, the national research laboratories in the form of the science councils, the private sector have really put their foot forward. And this is an example. Very early when we started off in the pandemic, this was even before the lockdown, we started producing the information to make sure that people knew what they were dealing with and how to deal with this. And we've actually done this in various languages for the African continent, together with partners like WaterNet and like AMCOW, and made sure that we were empowering beyond the borders of South Africa as well. As part of the work that we've been doing, we have also been organizing for the committee to have parliamentary briefs on various issues as the knowledge changes in those issues. And in this slide, you can see some examples from the 1920 year, just to remind you. So, Chair, the rest of the presentation is a repetition of the information that was already put out in the video. So with your permission and keeping within the time you allocated, I'm going to stop here now, and we look forward to the discussion, your comments, and we'll be very happy to answer all of the questions that are raised by the committee. I thank you, and I hand back to you, Chair. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, CEO. Let's go to the next presentation.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I am audible. Good morning to colleagues.
You are, Chair. You're welcome.
Okay, my name is Gerald Dumas. I'm the Chairperson of TCA, and thank you, DM, for the congratulatory message for receiving an unqualified audit opinion from the Auditor General. I think our gratitude also goes to the department for their support. TCTA operates in an area where investor confidence is critical. So a report from the Auditor General says the right message. I know we were all worried about the institution receiving a qualified audit opinion last time. But this was an unprecedented turnaround time as well. And I think we all did well to ensure that this is actually not prolonged. The CE is going to do a presentation and is going to touch on all the issues that are core to TCA in terms of its mandate and purpose, issues around the Lesotho Lands Water Project, project implementation, management of debt, raising funding, and advisory services. I thought it was important to actually note and also extend my gratitude to the minister who actually afforded me the opportunity to discuss some of the challenges that TCTA is faced with and also highlight some of the risks. The challenges we're actually focusing on the concurrence from the Minister of Finance on government guarantees to redeem loans and also concurrence on from the Ministry of Finance as well on government guarantees to raise funding from the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. I'm also grateful that the minister has actually, and the department has actually started the process of resolving some of these issues. Without any waste of time, I'll actually hand over to the CEO to do a presentation. And thanks, Chair, and thanks, DM. Thank you.
Chairperson. Chair.
Yes, DM, we were waiting for the CEO to play the presentation.
I'm sorry, I was muted. I was just saying, Chair, that the host has not given my CFO, Busisiwe Shong, hosting rights. So if that can be sorted, because we want to flash the presentation on the screen.
Okay, Vyogazi. DM.
To Busisiwe Shongwe, please.
Okay. Vyogazi, that in the meantime, DM, you wanted to say something?
No, leadership. I was just saying that the first team is done. You can allow the second team. Then I see Comrade Percy, they are ready now, leadership.
Oh,
yes,
okay.
Chair, I'm sorry, I'm just waiting for this because we did not have hosting rights. This must just go to Busisiwe Shongwe, as I've said. I see it's been given to me.
Vyogazi, give it to
Busisiwe Shongwe.
It's done,
Shongwe.
Okay.
It's done.
Yes. Members, I'm sorry for the delay in starting. As we are waiting, I did not get the note that Desigan followed. So our presentation won't be as exciting as theirs, Chair. It will just be straight to the issues. Busi, do you have the presentation?
No, CE, I still don't have rights. It says disabled.
Vyogazi?
Yes, it's done now. Busi?
Okay.
CFO, we're not there yet. We need to open the presentation, please.
We'll jump you because now you are going to the 5 minutes.
Oh, yeah, Chair, I must apologize for this. And I know that the committee did say last time that we need to be prepared beforehand, but we didn't have the hosting rights. I must apologize.
Thanks, CE. Can the members see the screen? I am sharing.
We can see the screen, but it just shows your computer, things that are on your computer. There is no presentation. You can see your box. It's gone now.
Chair, perhaps we need to do what you suggested. You can jump us. Oh, here's something coming.
Okay.
All right.
There is it. Proceed.
Yes, Chair. Can you make it into a slideshow? One back. Oh, it's a few, in fact. Thank you, Chair and members, as I've said. And I've said that I apologize for these glitches when we started. I guess this was sent to me rather than to the person that was going to share the presentation. Without any waste of time, I will go straight into some of the things that are related to the annual report, just highlighting the issue of the purpose of TCTA in line with what we're going to be sharing. Operating and maintaining delivery tunnel north of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project 1 to fulfill all the Republic's financial obligations in terms of all resulting from the treaty with Lesotho or Lesotho Highlands Water Project and any other function as directed by the minister. In this regard, TCTA has raised funds on behalf of the Department of Water and Sanitation and acted as implementing agent for both the department and Umgeni Water at some point. We have to provide other water management institutions such as the department, water boards, municipalities with advisory services. Thanks, Busi. And honing in on the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. There's a binational project between governments of Lesotho and South Africa. Lesotho stores water in Lesotho and transfers it to a point on the border south of Clarence in the Free State. I think it comes out at the Ash River outflow. South Africa pays the cost of the water transfer infrastructure in exchange for the right to receive water. Then South Africa pays a royalty to the government of Lesotho based on the net cost benefit of the scheme over a scheme wholly in South Africa. During construction of phase 2, it has been agreed that South Africa will raise the funds and pay for the infrastructure in return for the future benefit. TCTA has been assigned the responsibility of raising funding. I think this should be seen in line with what happened in 1986 on phase 1 when South Africa was still in isolation. There, all the money was raised via Lesotho and not on the South African side. But in terms of costs, this works better for us when it's done on the South African side. Although South Africa through TCTA was still responsible for paying the royalties even for phase 1. The infrastructure in Lesotho belongs to the Lesotho Highlands Development Authority, and South Africa has no claim on it. Thank you. And in terms of our project implementation portfolio, projects that are in implementation phase, it's a Mogollo and Crocodile River Water Augmentation Project, phase 2A. We usually call it the MACWAP 2A, and it's in Limpopo. Other projects that are in preparation phase, it's the Inkomati Water Project, phase 1 in KZN, the Bear River Full Flow Augmentation Scheme that we call Bravas in Western Cape. And then we do have projects in operations and maintenance. And this would now be the delivery tunnel north of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project that comes out of the Free State, and the acid mine drainage treatment plants that are all based in Gauteng. Thanks, Busi. Next slide. In terms of management of debt, because we are primarily a debt vehicle, we go into the market to raise funding, and then we are able to get that funding to service the debt and settle the loans or the bonds on the basis of the amount of money that we get through tariffs. The Vaal River system, this is incorporating the Lesotho Highlands Water Project and the short-term intervention for acid mine drainage, sitting at 13.2 billion that is outstanding at this stage. The Bear Water Project sitting at 488 million outstanding. The Vaal River Eastern Subsystem Augmentation Project, or FRESUP for short, sitting at 3.4 billion that is outstanding at this stage. The Moim-Gene Transfer Scheme Phase 1 sitting at 1.5 billion. Komati Water Scheme Augmentation Project sitting at 1.2 billion. And then Mogollo Crocodile River Augmentation Project, it's sitting at 1.6 3 billion that is outstanding at this particular point in time. Next slide, please. Now, when it comes to the amount of money that we need to raise at this stage, the Vaal River system for phase 2 of Lesotho Highlands Water Project, I know in brackets there it says 28 billion, but the other sessions that we've had with the committee are talking about 32.6 billion at this particular point in time. One thing is, today is actually the last day, a year ago exactly, when we actually had to close our books for the year that it's under review at this stage. And within that particular period, there were other debts that were not due as yet, like the scheme that we need to pay, the 9.6 billion that we need to pay, and the amount that is in the kitty. So here we are reporting as at last year, the same day. And there has been a lot of changes in terms of some of the amounts that came into TCTA and some of the debt that actually came forward. So that's why there is a differential. But if I need to unpack it some more, I can do that. Mogollo and Crocodile River Water Augmentation Project Phase 2A, we need to look at raising 12 billion. Umkomazi Water Project Phase 1, it's about 23 billion. The Bear River Full Flow Augmentation Scheme, it's around 800 million. The total amount required at the time was 64 billion. Indications are that there is sufficient interest from the market to provide commercial funding with government support, including guarantees where required. This project supports 75% of South Africa's GDP. If one looks at the fact that it's Gauteng, it's the city of Cape Town or the Western Cape in that way, and then it's also KZN, which are primarily the hubs, and even going into Limpopo as well. And then we do also provide advisory services, which the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission, we are actually overseeing the strategic integrated projects for SIP3 and SIP18. TCTA is responsible for coordination of these two SIPs. The Department of Water and Sanitation, Phase 1 of the Mzimvivu project, we have been responsible looking at the advanced infrastructure that had to be put in. And we also have a ministerial directive for project management services for that particular project as well. Thanks, Busi. Performance on predetermined objectives. That particular slide is not including a lot of things, but we put it down there that in line with what comes, because the AG always just looks at what the shareholder has said we needed to do. But over and above that, there's a lot of other measurements that are not included in there, especially if one looks at how each and every company has been run. So there is, I could not change the slides to actually reflect all the other areas of performance, because out of the 19 performance areas, we were able to actually reach 16 of them. So what you are seeing there are just the major projects where we've had some challenges in terms of raising of funding. Hence, the number looks the way it does. Moving on, it's the implement capital project in accordance with timelines agreed with DWS. And looking specifically at MARCWAP 2A, the tender design and documentation should have been completed on the 18th January 2020. As of 31 March 2020, the work was 90% complete. I think that's why we did not actually achieve this particular one. And this one is in the shareholder compact. And some of the issues really related to also the impact of COVID-19, because people that needed to be on the ground could not go in, on the ground. Even now, some of the borders between South Africa and Lesotho have actually been closed, and with the changing status all the time. So it's only now that we're trying to recover from that as well. Thank you, Busi. Operate and maintain designated projects in accordance with DWS requirements and specifications. On the acid mine drainage, the Western Basin, I think in terms of the year under review, 19 megaliters of water per day was treated compared to the targeted 30 to 33 megaliters of water per day. The reduced volume was due to, we say in the first force majeure event, but in fact what happened is the illegal miners, the so-called Zamazamas, actually came into the site or adjacent site, and they actually vandalized the electricity equipment, which does not belong to us, but belong to the mine and to Eskom. And that delayed the whole project in terms of being able to pump the amount of water that was necessary. So we've been working with the mines to actually get this back on track, and also look at the security that is required, because they really vandalized the other parts that support our plant. But our plant was still fine, but we could not do anything without electricity. Central Basin, the water was not lower to the required level, target level, at 118 meters below ground level. The achievement was 4 meters above ground level, below ground level. This was due to several plant outages and higher inflows into the basins. Since then, there has been a lot of good rains, and they started affecting the amount of water that we needed to pump out as well. Eastern Basin, the water was not lowered to the target level of 126 meters below ground level. The achievement was 1.7 meters above the target level. Unplanned 2 months plant outage due to failure of a transformer providing electricity to the plants as well. So we've had a lot of challenges in terms of acid mine drainage, but what I can say is we've managed to ensure that we don't get any of the water decanting at all. So there was never any risks to people's lives in terms of this acid mine drainage. Next slide, please. And in terms of MACWAP, the income agreement was submitted to DWS for signing in June 2019 as targeted. But I think part of some of the issues that we've had have been now to get it back signed, and how long it took for us to actually get the necessary agreements for us to actually go into the market, which has been, I think, the last part of the presentation will talk about critical issues that we want to bring to the attention of the portfolio committee. Raising funding for the implementation of infrastructure. For MACWAP, as at 31st March 2020, an amount of 672 million in cash was available in the MACWAP account for use on the implementation of MACWAP 2A. In terms of the VRS, which is the valve river system, as at 31st March 2020, an amount of 3.7 billion was invested and facilities available for drawdown were 6.5 million, were 6.5 million, a total of 10.2 billion, and enabling all commitments on the implementation of phase 2 of Lesotho Highlands Water projects to be met. So the way we run these chair and members, we actually ensure that we isolate each project and make sure that based on the requirements, each cash flow and its strategy is actually isolated to the project. So all our projects are ring-fenced. I think that's why we are reporting in this way, so that members have a view of where we are versus the amount of money we need, and what do we do with the money as we get it based on the revenue that comes from each of the projects. On managing debt within the approved borrowing limits, I'm happy to report that all debts were managed within borrowing limits on all payments obligations were timeously met. So I don't think I'll go through each of the projects. These are the projects I've been talking about, but we came under the limit, which is what is required by National Treasury as well. Thank you. On this part of the financials, Chair, I will allow CFO to take over, and then I'll come back later in terms of the last part of the presentation. Busi.
Thanks, CE. In terms of the financials, I'll just go through the significant items on the financial statement of financial position. The first one that we have there, that's the tariff receivable. That one is the right for TCTA to receive cash from DWS, and that's in regard of construction work that was done. And the cash and cash equivalents, what we have there, that's the amount of cash that we have on hand, including all bank and call deposits. As for the retained income, this one is driven by the surplus for the year under review. The surplus that was there, that was the finance income. And the next one that we have, this is long-term financial market liabilities. This is basically the borrowings that we have as TCTA. In terms of the tariff receivable, there was a reduction from 20 billion to 16.9. And the reason for this is the lower project activity. So with the lower project activity, we incurred less costs than the amount that we actually received from the DWS. On cash and cash equivalent, there is an increase from 3 billion to 4.2 billion. And the reason for this was due to the increase of VRS funds from the free cash. And this amount was sitting in our bank, and it will be used to service debts and for other normal operating costs. The next item, this is the retained income. This one, there was an increase of 504 million, and this is mostly due to the finance income. Given the fact that we didn't go out and borrow more money, then we ended up earning more funds in our bank. Hence, we have this increase in the retained income. On the next item, on the long-term financial market, there is a reduction from 20.6 billion to 19.9. And the reason for this reduction is due to capital repayments that were made. We did make some repayments, that is to VRS, to FRESUP, and to MMTS2. On the next slide, this is a comparison between the actual versus budget. I'll start with the first one. This is the tariff build. We had a budget of 7 billion. The actual was 7.9, meaning that we exceeded the budget. And this is due to the volumes being higher than what was originally used for the budget. In terms of the running expenditure, we had underspend, and the reason for this underspending is the lower staff cost, and this is due to the vacancies that we had at year end, and the O&M royalties and the LHDA operations and maintenance costs were below what we originally budgeted for. In terms of the finance charges, we budgeted 2.1, and then the actual charges were 1.7, and this was due to the delays in setting up the JSE program for VRS, and we ended up not borrowing as much as we originally thought that we would borrow. The next item that we have is on the capital expenditure. We had budgeted 2.8 billion. Our actual spending was 1.3. And the breakdown of this underspending, I think the first one that we have, it's the AMD short term. On this one, there was a delay. This was due to the challenges that were experienced with the PSP's design for services for the scope. The next one is the MMTS2. This one, there was low spend because of court order that was still pending, so we couldn't continue with the work. And on LHWP, there was delays in awarding of the advanced infrastructure contracts. On MEQUAP 2A, there was a delay in appointing the PSP, and this was to the fact that we could not have, there was no funding secured by year end. And again, we were still waiting for ESCOM to finalize the deposit that was required for the start of the substation construction. On Bravos, there was delays as well because the project agreements were not being finalized yet with the with the water users. And for the audit opinion, we did receive an unqualified audit opinion with the matter of emphasis on royalties. The issue with the royalties was that in 2006, 2007, the Republic of South Africa and the Lesotho, they were supposed to recompute the volumes, and based on this recomputation, then we were supposed to basically pay the lower royalties fees. Since this was not done, we continued paying the royalties based on the old volumes. This basically resulted in us overpaying for the royalties. With agreement with the AG, we agreed that we have to recognize this as a contingent asset in our financial records. And this is a matter that we have requested the department to finalize with the government of Lesotho to ensure that going forward we expect so that we can be able to pay the correct royalty amounts. The other issues that the Auditor General raised, they had issues with one, I think it's the material corrections that we made to the financial statements. And this as well is due to the fact that we do rely on information that we receive from the LHDA. So when there are changes that are done on their financials, we have to do those changes as well. So it is something that we are working on together with the LHDA to ensure that when we do submit our financials, at least the information that we have is complete and accurate. The other issue that was raised by the Auditor General is the irregular expenditure. There was a concern with the irregular expenditure that was incurred. And they also raised an issue on the predetermined objectives. And those issues were dealt with, but there was just one that we could not address at the time. So it remained in our final letter as a qualification in terms of predetermined objectives. On the next slide, we'll be looking at, this is the irregular expenditure that was incurred. The opening balance for the year was 663 million, and we incurred new irregular expenditure of 141 million. The 61.5, that's the one that was actually incurred now, and then the 80 million, it's something that was only discovered during the audit under review, and meaning at the end of the year we had irregular expenditure of 804 million. There was no irregular expenditure that was condoned during the year under review. As management, the progress in addressing this irregular expenditure, what we have done, we have trained all employees on the operational delegation of authority and on the irregular expenditure operating procedure. We established a loss control committee, and this is the committee that will attend to all the irregular expenditure incurred and will ensure that this is done as per the National Treasury guidelines. And for the irregular expenditure, the 804 million, management is in the process of implementing consequence management. On completion of this consequence management, we will request a condonement from National Treasury. The other thing that we intend doing as management is to request an exemption from practice note 3, and this will only be done once we have addressed all backlog issues. The request for this exemption is due to the fact that it's not, as TCTA, we think it's sometimes impractical to be able to stop if there is construction, to stop the construction so that we can request for a deviation from National Treasury. Because most of the time it's either, I think the managers on site, they'll have to decide whether we'll have to incur the irregular expenditure or we end up incurring wasteful expenditure in terms of if we stop the constructors, then we'll have to pay them for that stand of time. So it is something that we will take with we will be discussing with National Treasury, that is for the current financial year. In terms of the going concern, management has assessed TCTA as a going concern. This means that we'll be able to meet all our obligations as they fall due. There were events of default, and we don't think that will really impact us as TCTA in terms of us being able to continue as a going concern. And over to you, CE. You are on mute, CE.
Okay, thank you. On the critical issues for TCTA, you can go to the next slide. These are our pain points, Chair and members. The securing government guarantees to fund redemption of the 9.4 billion Water Services Project 5 bond maturing on the 28th of May, which is around a month or two this year. This bond is government guaranteed. I know that the CFO has just talked about us being a going concern and having enough to actually pay our debts, but we are a bit worried because even if that's the case, there are decisions that we need in terms of the Minister of Finance really giving us the guarantees that we require. Securing government guarantees for the raising of funds to enable Lesotho to proceed with building phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project. We are using what is called a FIDIC contract in terms of how we deal with it. And the FIDIC contract for major projects like this, some of the people that are tendering going through the PFME aligned process would require us to give them proof that there is money that will be able to pay them before they commit to the project. So hence our ability to raise the funding is dependent on getting the borrowing limits, the concurrence between our minister and the Minister of Finance, and also with the guarantees, the same issue. The last issue, and I'm going to unpack each of these issues. The last issue that has been a bit of a challenge has been the freezing of the 2020-2021 capital tariffs. Initially, when we did this, that was especially for projects not impacting social users. But I am happy to say that even if it's a post-reporting event, the minister has actually allowed us to go ahead with those projects that do not have any social impact on users at this particular point in time. But for some of our biggest projects, with like the VRS or the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, it's still a problem if one looks at our tariffing models and how we intend repaying the money that we've raised, which is a matter that is closely looked at by our funders and the agencies that actually rate TCTA. So for now, this creates a bit of a problem. If we see the next step, I think this now unpacks the issues. Repayment of the WSP5 bond on the 28th of May 2021. The issue is 3.8 billion of this must be refinanced. TCTA is finalizing negotiations with various lenders for 12.7 billion. I'm happy to say at this stage, I know it's a post-reporting event, that we have been able to talk to the funders, and there's a potential 15.2 billion that we'll be able to raise, pending the concurrence of the minister in terms of granting us the guarantees that are necessary to secure these loans. And we need to also get, we've concluded the negotiations on the 4.5 billion with the DFIs for the redemption and to fund Lesotho Highlands Water Project 2. These loans require government guarantees, as I've been explaining. And the impact, if we are not given the guarantees, which means we won't be able to do the repayment, is we will have to get this 3.8 billion from the department or from the National Revenue Fund. And I don't think at this stage, in terms of where the economy of South Africa sits, that's something that both the department nor the national fiscus can afford. Inability to raise funds for the other projects, because we need about 64 billion rands. The problem with this is if you default on one bond, it affects your ability as a company to actually get the markets to agree to give you money. So it's important that we deal with this issue, because this is going to have an impact on major projects that really supports the GDP of the country. Negative implications for other state-owned enterprises wanting to raise debt, and negative implications on the sovereign debt. So it's quite important for us to be able to even get the support of the committee in terms of ensuring that we do get that concurrence in terms of what the Minister of Finance decision has been thus far. But I am also happy to say that there has been a lot of engagement between myself and the DG of the department and the DG of Department of Finance. And I know that the chair of TCTA has also met with our minister, and our minister has also sent a proper letter outlining everything to the Minister of Finance. So we're just waiting for that final decision that needs to come from the Minister of Finance. Next page. For phase 2 of the Lesotho Highlands Water Project, South Africa has agreed to provide the fund to the Lesotho Highlands Development Authority through TCTA to enable it to build the project. And if we are not able to get those guarantees, we won't be able to raise the fundings. And the projects can actually stop. South Africa will have broken an international agreement with Lesotho with implications for SA's reputation. Water securities for users in the integrated Vaal River system will be reduced. And this supports 50 to 60 of South Africa's GDP, because it's not only supporting Gauteng, but also 3 or 4 other provinces. If one looks at that water that comes out of the integrated Vaal River system ends up. Thank you. And the last one is the issue is, even if the tariff to the end user is frozen, the repayment to the lenders remains unchanged, because the lenders would have given us money on the basis of when they do their due diligence, how are we planning on repaying them? And we do have at least a 20-year view for those long-term bonds, or even there are some short-term funding that we had to raise 5 years or 7 years. I mean, WSP5 itself was a 7-year program, but it was done in different stages. Impact: if insufficient money is received, users pay more for the project in terms of interest payments, which for all intents and purposes can be seen as fruitless expenditure, although I'm not sure against whom, against the state. Possible risk of default if shortfall is too high. This is currently estimated at approximately 450 million, the majority of which is on the Vaal River system, which needs it for the repayment of the WSP5 bond. Money diverted from other requirements, such as operations and maintenance, to meet the debt repayment obligations, which might be in the long run a bad thing, because we will work with the department to get this paid, but then they'll have to get that money from somewhere else. And what we don't want to do is to get the department to compromise on the operations of maintenance, of looking at dams and the bulk infrastructure that they are dealing with. So I think this is the last slide of the presentation. I would like to thank the members and the chair, and I think we'll wait after the next presentation for questions. Thank you.
Thanks, CEO. The last presentation, Chair of Usuthu.
Morning, Chairperson, Honorable Zimenya, members of the committee, Honorable Deputy Minister, Mr. Mahlobo, senior management from DWS. We are still trying to get hold of the Chairperson of our board, represented by Ma'am Wiggins, Siobhan Wiggins. I think she is on. Yeah, she's going to be connecting soon, Chairperson. Just a minute. We're trying to assist her to connect.
But she was supposed to have connected them.
Yeah, she's connected. I think she's just battling with her line. Chairperson, with your permission, I am not sure if we can be allowed to proceed with the presentation.
Yes, proceed.
In the interest of time.
Yes, proceed, sir. When he comes, we'll allow her to make his remarks.
Okay. All right. Now, thank you very much, Chairperson, and greetings to all members of the committee. Senior management is already alluded to. We're going to be presenting the report for the Inkomati-Usuthu. We are going to also augment, Chairperson. There was a presentation that was submitted initially, but in the interest of clarity and just giving context to some of the issues, we have given additional information just to make sure that honorable members have got sufficient detail and context in terms of the issues that we're going to cover. And already alluded to, Chair, there was some information which we felt was important, some of which has been touched on by the DM. I mean, the loss of our chairperson and the issues surrounding the CEO. We felt that that was important information that members would really like to also hear about. Perhaps by way of introduction, this is just going to be our brief project outline, presentation outline, which members, I believe, have had a look at to deal with the introductions and our area, strategic objectives and the overview. We are, Chairperson, going to deal with the purpose at this point. Just to indicate, Chair, that the purpose of this presentation is to ensure that members understand our performance outcomes for the year 2019-2020. The Inkomati-Usuthu Catchment Management Agency, as members would know, is a creature of the National Water Act, Section 78, and is mandated to deal with the issues of protection, conservation, development, use, management of water resources within our catchment management area. In doing our work, we involve our critical stakeholders who are playing an active role in making sure that we achieve our mandate. Some of the areas, Chair, that we are servicing would include your strategic use for strategic assets for the country, including the ESCOM power stations, the Sasol complex in Secunda. We are also responsible, being a transboundary catchment management agency, to make sure that the agreement, the treaties between Mozambique and Swaziland and South Africa in relation to the supply of water are realized. But we're also responsible for making sure that agriculture, forestry, mining, industry, domestic and tourism within our catchment management area gets its fair share in terms of water supply. We are funded through a parliamentary grant and the water resource charges. We are Schedule 3A public entity. Just on the next slide here to indicate our strategic location. The slide on the left of the screen just gives the picture in terms of us being a part of the Inkomati River Basin, operated under the Inkomati Agreement. But within the slide on the right just depicts us within the Mpumalanga province, that we are covering 3 districts within this province as well. On the legislative framework, Chair, those are just the specific sections of the National Water Act that from which we derive our mandate, but also the other pieces of legislation that are there. I'm sure members have had an opportunity to look at our vision and mission. I'm not going to waste time on that, Chair. In terms of our strategic objectives for the period under review, we have said we are going to be looking at issues of effective, efficient, sustainable water management resource of the water resources under our control, collaborative and coordinated integrated water resource management for wise socio-economic development, promotion of and the pursuance of international obligations, is already alluded to, knowledge generation and effective water management. Chairperson, maybe just the overview in terms of our performance for the year. We can mention, Chair, that we have also received an unqualified audit opinion for the period under review. We have also been able to, in terms of our overall performance, to reach up to 84%, which is for us a big milestone given the challenges that we've had during the period under review. On the PEE spending, Chair, we've also been able to, the departmental target is 30%. We've set ourselves a target of 40%. We're able to reach 37%, which is still below our target, but we're glad, Chair, that at least we're closer to the target that we have set for ourselves. In terms of our performance program, On the governance expenditure, we were at 84% of the 9.5 that had been allocated. Corporate services program, 98% of the 94. Water resource management, 64%. So essentially, in terms of our expenditure per program, we're at 80%, achieving 84 of our targets, because partly some of the targets were achieved using internal operational resources, as it were. Chair, we will now just go through the performance tables per program, and say that in terms of the corporate services program, which houses governance, we were able to achieve about 100% of our targets, making sure that the board activities are managed and they take place as planned, but also making sure that the compliance issues relating to submission of reports to the mother department, that those take place. Compliance with board resolutions as well. We're sitting at 81%. Monitoring of our communication plan, 80%. Chairperson, our catchment management area is quite rural, and on an annual basis, we try and make sure that our CSI projects, they focus on those rural communities that are forming critical stakeholders for our area. And in this regard, for the period under review, we identified a village, Jerusalem, under the city of Mbombela, where there's still quite a scarcity of water. And we identified that we would put 2 boreholes there and 2 storage tanks. That project was done successfully. Underwater resource management, Chairperson, we continue to make sure that the transformation agenda takes place within that space, and the target is often was for the period.
Ask you, who are you?
Can I request that those that are in the meeting to mute their mic? Proceed, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. We are saying underwater resource management, Chair, the transformation project on water resource allocation. We had a target of 4 reports within the period, and that was achieved. The monitoring projects for dam levels and river flows, we had a target of 4 reports, and that was achieved. The routine maintenance of installed data loggers, just giving us information on water quality. Of the targets that we had set for ourselves of 40, we were able to do 36. And on the inspections that we had set for ourselves, on the using our rainfall gauges, we were able to achieve all our targets there. Chairperson, we can also mention that most of our targets, as already indicated here, were achieved fully. In particular, those that have to do with inspections of specialist reports. Usually, when we do water use license applications, there would be quite a lot of specialist reports that are required there, and we try and make sure that all our specialist inputs are done on time, and our engagement plans as well have also been successfully done, Chair. Under corporate services, we have tried to make sure that the risk management environment within the space is adequately and properly managed. And in that regard, all of the recommendations of the risk management committee that end up with the audit committee and the board are addressed, and we've had 100% response in that particular regard. The issue of the revenue strategy, which hinges quite strongly on our sustainability, has been a focus during the year, and we wanted to make sure that we've got a debt collection strategy that is approved by the board and implemented, and we're able to achieve that. Chairperson. On the board, on the BEE, as already alluded to in the opening remark, we were able to achieve about 37.3% of the targets that we had set for ourselves in terms of our BEE expenditure. IT steering committee targets, all of them were achieved. Records management achieved. We also were able to deal with the skills training for the team, creating job opportunities. We were saying there that we had about 17 that were targeted for the year, and all of those were achieved. Filling of vacant positions, 100% achieved at that level. In terms of financial sustainability, Chair, I would like to request that the CFO just take us through that particular report. Thank you, Chair.
Good morning, Chair. To take us through the financial performance of the IU today, in the year under audit from the year reporting, we had allocated budget after the.
Is it the CFO?
Yeah, CFO, if you can come on. Come on. I'm trying to yeah.
Morning, Chair. Thank you, CE. Just to take members through the financial performance of the IUCMA for the period 2019-20. We had approved budget of 130 million at the beginning of the financial year. And then subsequent to that, we received permission to roll over funding from the previous financial year with 95 million. So that then took our overall budget to 225 million for the year 2019-20. Of this revenue stream, 22% was received from water resource management invoices, which came up to 50 million. We only achieved to collect 39 million of this amount due to VNV activities that happened during the year. Government grants, we had earmarked to receive 80 million, and this was received in entirety. We also had interest received for 507 million. We had huge interest received because of, I think we applied prudent cash management in the year, and that yielded that amount of interest revenue, as well as the rollover funds that we were given permission by National Treasury to retain. And in terms of our expenditure, budgeted expenditure was 225 million, and of this we had set aside 38% to fund personnel costs, as well as 58% for general expenses, 4% for lease rentals, as well as operating leases. By the end of the year under review, we had spent 175 million of this, which resulted in a surplus of 45 million for the year under review. The surplus that we recorded for the year then took our retained earnings to 99 million. Of this, about 76 million was cash and cash equivalents, and the difference being accrued to receivables from our traders. So those are the figures for 2019-20. In terms of our financial performance, we are still a going concern as IUCMA. However, obviously putting reliance still on the government grants, they are quite key to our performance, to our operations. So we will still need definitely we're still putting dependence on that revenue stream. Thank you. I'll hand it over to the CE.
Thank you very much, Chairperson, and thank you, CFO. Just to conclude, Chair, we also wanted to reflect briefly on our job creation and employment efforts that we have undertaken during the year. 24 employment opportunities were created, and we have got the graduate development program, Chair, wherein we put about We put graduates that have just come out of university, giving them internships in the environment for 24 months. During the year under review, we took about 14 of those, and the internal projects that we were implementing appointed about 3, and then also the 7 permanent positions that we have had were planned for the year. All of those were filled during that same period. Under skills development share, which we consider a critical enabler for our capacity to deliver on our mandate, we try on an annual basis to make sure that our team is put on training programs. 52% of our employees were put on training programs during the year. Some were on short courses. We made sure that some are awarded bursaries, some are sent even to conferences so that then they improve their capacity to deliver on the functions that constitute their work. But we also issued 5 external bursaries during the period. The students that are attending the trainings under those bursaries are still undergoing those trainings. But maybe just as a concluding slide, Chair, we also wanted to reflect on some of the teething issues that we are dealing with as an organization. We remain settled with the issue of the international obligations, in particular towards Mozambique, which is heavily reliant on the Crocodile East, and we know that the water volumes in that catchment have been shrinking year on year. We are in engagements with the department as an intervention to try and see if there can be capacity to create storage capacity within that catchment. And we are also encouraging water users to look at alternative sources of water, including groundwater and rain harvesting, as some of the interventions. Chair, we also are looking at the issue of the Schedule 3 delegations, in particular in light of the ongoing work that we're doing around the VNV, but also making sure that we control water use, in particular during the drought seasons that we have in our environment. We have quite a number of interventions that we're doing at that level, one of which is engaging the department to make sure that the issue of the Schedule 3 delegations is finalized. But we're also working within our committees that we have established within the catchment to make sure that there are river committees that are operating in the environment, making sure that in drought environments, even though we don't have the powers as yet, but we can work with them to make sure that there's control at that level, so that then there's no over abstraction, which can then affect the hydrology. The VNV project continues, Chair. We have established internal capacity within the institution to make sure that it is fast tracked, because it has taken quite some time, and we know that it's an important program that we must finalize. We planned in the current financial year to run a project under that same unit on water audit, because we believe it's important for the transformation agenda, making sure that there's water set aside for HDIs. And in order for us to do that, we must finalize the validation and verification project in that particular regard. Chair, we also continue to have challenges relating to wastewater treatment plants in most of our local municipalities, where those plants are now old and are kind of non-compliant. We've had quite a number of engagements. We continue within the context of the current district development model to engage with local municipalities to invest in those plants and make sure that they are compliant with the requirements that have been set for them, and then they don't and also that they don't compromise water quality within the environment. The recoverability of debt from water users continues to be a work that consumes much of our focus, because without revenue, Chair, we cannot survive as an organization. So we continue to make sure that we educate our water users through our public awareness programs, workshop, Izimbizo, but we also have established internal capacity in terms of our legal division to make sure that in instances where we must collect those revenues using legal means, that we are then able to do that. The death of the chairperson and another member of the board chair has, I must say, affected a bit in terms of the governance side of the institution. We currently have sent communication for consideration of the minister so that those vacancies can be closed. But currently, members who are remaining in the board are taking the necessary responsibility with the deputy chairperson, assuming the acting position of the chairperson of the board. And we believe that in due course, we will the minister will be able to make those replacements. In the same spirit, Chair, the contract of the previous CEO expired at the end of January this year. We have started the communications and submissions for ministerial concurrence so that then that vacancy can be filled. But at the current moment, we've got executives that on a rotational basis, they act in that capacity and try and make sure that matters continues to be managed. That's our presentation, Chair. Thank you. Or maybe I can also mention, Chair, before I step off the platform, that Madam Siobhan Wiggins has joined the meeting, who's representing our deputy chairperson, and maybe with your permission, Chair, she can also say a few words. Thank you.
Yes, she can continue. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning again, Chair and honourable members, and all other participants, all protocol observed. I apologise for losing my signal earlier when I was making opening remarks. I'm Siobhan Wiggins, a member of the board representing our board and deputy chairperson. As our CEO has indicated, we've had quite a challenging year, with our chairperson passing away and another member passing away also from coronavirus, and our CEO's contract expiring. Despite this, we did manage to achieve an unqualified audit, which makes it the 9th year in a row. So that is, I think, something to be proud of. And despite the challenges I think the whole country has had, and our institution in particular, we've weathered the year and we've come through. We've achieved most of our targets. Those that we didn't achieve, we'll certainly be working on. And yes, we await the concurrence of the minister so that we can proceed to replace the CEO and to gain additional members to bolster our board so that we don't lose any ground from a governance point of view. I thank you, Chairperson and members. We take your questions.
Thank you very much, Acting Chair. Honorable members, that was the presentation from the 3 entities. I'm going to recognize hands from members to interact with the presentation. For now, I have one hand, 2, 3. Honorable members, Honorable Mhlala, Honorable Mvana, Honorable Sehlwai, for now. Honorable Koni, the 4th one. Let's proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson, for the opportunity. I've got a few questions on the 3 entities, but I'm going to start with the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority. My first question is, how does the TCTA envisage its operations within the proposed National Water and Sanitation Infrastructure Agency? The second one is, have all amounts owed by the department transferred to the TCTA? The third question, Chairperson, on TCTA, how can South Africa address the shortages of engineers, which is so vitally needed in your field of work? The fourth question, what is the TCTA's role as part of the advisory services within the Presidential Infrastructure Coordinating Commission? And lastly, on TCTA, functionality and sustainability of current and future infrastructure water project in South Africa, on financial and non-financial, require greater attention in South Africa. What are some of your recommendations to increase viability of bulk infrastructure of the water value chain? And on the Water Research Council, Chairperson, I've got 3 questions. The first one is, what are the major water challenges the world would have to grapple with in a changing world? What is your current impact factor of your publications? And lastly, what is your engagement or collaboration with the Center in Water Research and Development at Wits University? I think I've got the fourth question, which says that, is the Commission looking at future projects with a focus of the potential role of spatial planning for adaptation to climate change in the urban water supply sector? That is the last one on Water Research Council. Chairperson, on Inkomati-Usuthu. Chairperson, is it possible for the officials or the CEO and the team from Nkomati to email us the new presentation? Because the one that we received lacks information that we may require in future. I do understand he apologized on the beginning of his presentation, but can that presentation be emailed? Because the one that we received doesn't have anything. And the other thing I saw on the new presentation, they were speaking about, I don't know what is the CSI, but it assisted the people of Jerusalem with tanks and the boreholes, 2 boreholes and 2 tanks. Can that be extended to other communities as well? In Inkomati municipality, the people of Hlalagahle in future are struggling with water, and KwaMaCekeza, they don't have water there. Steenbok, Ward 8, and Dludluma, Ward 6. Can they extend their mandate to the other section of the community? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mushala. Honorable Mvana.
Thanks, Chairperson. Chairperson, first and foremost, let me rather say to Nkomati, we commend for the unqualified report. But in terms of their targets, how we wish that they can reach their targets 100%. The few percentage that is left outside or is left not to be achieved, we are also concerned about it. Would like 100% achievement in their targets. Then there is something that they talk about, deficit or surplus of 45. It's 45,901,586. what is it that they are going to do with that, and what is it for? With Water Research Commission, I'm not sure whether I am excited about the projects that they are involved in. I'm happy in a way that they are presenting those projects, how we wish that they can continue a good work that they are doing. Of course, also they have to pull up their socks even in those projects that they are mentioning in the report. TCTA, my concern is I see that they have written the management of debt. I'm asking myself, how are they going to do that? The other one, there is this 64 billion that needs to be fundraised. I'm also interested on how are they going to fundraise that money. Reason for that, Chair, is that I'm so concerned about those rivers that they have mentioned, especially the Val River, which is short of 28 billion in phase 2, knowing exactly we've been there and we could see that there's a lot that needs to be done in Val River. Let me stop there for now, Chair. I will maybe come around again.
Thank you very much, Honorable Vanna. Honorable Siswai.
Thank you, Chairperson. Good morning to everyone, yourself, Chair, and the department and the colleagues. Chairperson, thank you for the presentation. I'll be speaking only on the Water Resource Commission. The presenter presented in a role that the Commission is engaged on in terms of pollution. I think the department for some time is struggling to address the issue. And the issue of polluters is causing a huge and unhealthy environment to our people. And the water that the people are drinking is not healthy. We speak a lot about the scarce resources, that water is a scarce resource. It cannot make it not scarce when we have got water that makes you to be sick. I just want to know the intervention that they are looking at as a commission to really intervene and assist the department. The second one, Chair, is an area which is a strategic objective of government to eliminate the continuous discrimination against young people in education and skills development and training. I hear that the Commission is highly involved in that program, investing on young people, because the issue of investing on young people is not only promoting human rights, it promotes economic rights for the future. Now, one is interested that in which direction the angle of professionalism that they are looking at in terms of empowering young people. You see, because sometimes EPWP is empowering young people, but the angle that we're looking at is a future investment which would make the young people to be entrepreneurs, to contribute in the economy of the country in a matter that will sustain economic growth of the country. Those are the only two questions that I had, Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Honorable Pasengwe.
Thank you, Chairperson. Let me appreciate the three presentations, and I think they are good and bad. But my comment is that one, I want to commend TCTA with their school gardening project, because honestly, especially the previously disadvantaged schools, the environment is so bad and unfriendly to learners. Big yards, dry, and very gloom. It's so depressing when you look at those schools' environment. So I think that will assist in greening the school, and there's a lot of benefits out of that. It will change the face and the environment as a whole. And it will also even change the nutrition for learners, including the nearby community. Because obviously, if they have vegetables there, they'll be able to feed the community which is closer. But one question which I want to find out about, how are they going to fund the bill of water? Because that has always been a challenge for communities, that even when they must have gardens in their homes and so on, there's a water bill which must be paid. So if they can just address this one. But I also have one question for all the agencies. In terms of our historic issue of inequality of distribution of water, do you think that, on a scale of 1 to 5, do you think that your performance is good, or are you happy with your performance? Where are you between 1 to 5? In terms of your priorities, what is it which you think you didn't do well in it? What is that which you are going to do to improve the situation? Thank you, Chairperson.
Can I request those that have spoken to lower their hands? If you are not, if you don't want to speak again. Honorable Mvana, you want to speak again? Honorable Mvana. Honorable Butasteki. Honorable Teki.
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes.
Yes, sorry. I don't know. I had my earphones. I don't know. Maybe they are not working. I was saying, Chair, the expiry of the CEO date in January, and the other senior colleagues are acting. Chair, probably this is for the department and the board. We knew that there's an expiry date, and we have not done what we should have done. Can the board comment on that matter? Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Teki. Just to add on questions from members, what you are raising, Honorable Teki, is very much important, that the country, Honorable Mashiro would say that the country, we've got a high number of unemployment in the country, but we're sitting, as government, we're sitting with the open vacancies and putting people to act, and water is becoming worse, because if you look at starting from the department now to entities, it's the same thing. And the DM and the person who's representing the acting DG, probably you might want to give us a concrete answer for today so that we're able to understand what you want to take this institution to. The second issue is on the Water Research Commission. Let me congratulate all the entities for unqualified report and the Water Research Commission on the clean audit. We appreciate that and congratulations to the chair and the CEO. Pick it up. On the Water Research Commission, just to check how far we in terms of the amendment that was supposed to have been implemented, because there was a amendment that was supposed to have happened. And then on the TCTA, just to add on what Honorable Mohlala has said in terms of their coordination and working in relationship with the presidential infrastructure the section, just to check in terms of even the money that has been pronounced by the president, how the TCTA is it going to, or are they going to be able to access those resources and beside waiting for their own way of raising funds? Are you able to tap in this infrastructure budget that has been pronounced by the president? And secondly, in terms of the Vaal River system, you are focusing on the mine drainage, the acid mine drainage. But again, the dam itself is polluted by various municipalities. Which department it's focusing on that, and majority of municipalities which does not have capacity. How do you see yourself involved assisting the department, even through getting some more resources to clean that water, looking at that infrastructure as it's supposed to service the large portion of the country, including your economic activity in Gauteng and the other provinces, as you mentioned. Inkomati-Usuthu, the issue of the Schedule 3 delegation, it has been raised. My question is to the department. It's been raised even the last financial year, just to check with the department through DM. What is it that is holding this delegation? What is the problem? Because even the last financial year it was raised. The second issue is on can the acting CEO break down the employment that they've created in terms of gender, including the graduates that they have empowered for the past financial year? Those are the addition that I wanted to add on members' questions. Can we get the the entities to respond, and the DM will be the last with the department.
Chair, I just want to make one correction before they respond. May I?
Yes, yes, honorable member.
Thank you very much. Sorry, the comment which I made about school gardening was supposed to go to the research commission. I'm sorry that I made a mistake. I quoted TCTA instead. Thanks,
Okay.
Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Zeki, you still want to speak? I can see your hand is up. Honorable Zeki. Okay, he has lowered the hand. Honorable Mvana, your hand is up.
It's an old hand, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Can you lower it so that I can then be able to pick up the follow-ups? Let's get the response, starting with the first presenters to respond to their questions.
Thank you very much, Chair, Honorable Chair, and Honorable Members of Parliament for your questions. I will respond to a few questions and let the CEO respond to most of them. In response to Honorable Mohlala, her question was about the major water challenges facing South Africa and globally. There are two major challenges. Firstly, countries like South Africa, we are a water scarce country. And secondly, pollution coming from poorly maintained wastewater treatment plants, mining, agriculture, and other sources of pollution. So those are the two. So the scarcity part, the Water Research Commission's major focus is to come up with water efficient technologies. That's why it was established in 1971. And the Water Research Commission has done a lot of work in that regard. But the challenge obviously is the polluters, which as far as wastewater treatment works, which is a source of major pollution, one, there is no consequence management for the polluters. And two, from the research that we have done, most of the problems of pollution coming from poorly managed wastewater treatment plants is really that the people who are responsible lack technical understanding of the impact of discharging poorly or untreated sewage into rivers because they lack the skills. So for me, if there can be skills development and obviously compliance enforcement, we can deal with the pollution element. And then from a scarcity aspect, WRC's main focus of work, especially with regards to sanitation, is promoting water efficient sanitation technologies. But because in people's minds, they see those technologies as inferior, people continue to demand full waterborne sanitation. So there is a need of a cultural change within society that we all recognize that water is a valuable resource. We should not think that if you get a water efficient technology, you are getting an inferior technology, because it's in the interest of everyone that we manage our water resources properly, because they are so important to our livelihood. And then I think another question that I want to, in fact, I think Honorable Slai, her question on wastewater treatment works, I have already responded to that. Desigan will take care of the questions I have not addressed. And then another area is with regards to historic inequalities in access to water for the poor. The problem that again we have is there is a preference for inappropriate water supply solutions for rural areas. You find most rural areas have easy access to groundwater, which is on site and it does not require huge investment in infrastructure. But you go to a rural area and see infrastructure for surface water where people never even get one drop of water from the taps. Well, I know from my own rural area, we do have such a scheme, but no one has even gotten a drop of water from the source because the river, which is supposed to be the source, it dries up in winter. And that's something that's known by everyone. But the infrastructure provided is to draw water from that river that is dry in winter. So we need to get the fundamentals in place as society. It's not a research question because research, we provide all the information, but the scaling up as WRC is not within our competence. So we all need to work together to find appropriate solutions that address those historical imbalances. Desigan, can you address the rest of the other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Chairperson of the WRC Board and Chairperson of the committee. I will go quickly through the others as well. I just want to pull out one thing that hasn't been asked directly, and it was referred to in the TCTA CEO's presentation, and I think it's quite critical, and this is the issue around funding, and in particular the issue around the water tariffs, because this is a seriously major issue, and I can just tell the committee that one of the things that we have started on the request of National Treasury and the Department of Water and Sanitation is that we are starting to unpack an analysis on the raw water tariffs and the implications of the increases associated with those raw water tariffs. And if the committee members wanted to engage that, I could certainly expand on that just now. But to go through the question list and to supplement what has already come from the chair of the WRC board, the thing that I would add to the major water challenges is that we have a pollution challenge, absolutely. This is a global problem. It is one where you have increases in pollution, increases in salinity, and emerging pollutants also in this domain. So, for example, pharmaceutical water pollution is quite new inside the system. We now have hormonal disruptors in many parts of our freshwater system here and elsewhere in the world. So in addition to our wastewater treatment plants being able to deal with the classical pollutants, it now needs to deal with these ones. And we're not engaging it alone. We're engaging this in a global alliance as well. So the WRCs of the world, if you like, combined in a structure called the Global Water Research Coalition. And this is a project that's very high on our list, as well as other kinds of pollutions that weren't an issue before. For example, microplastics is now a very engaging problem. We have microplastics in almost all the freshwater systems in South Africa already. And dealing with microplastics is very different from dealing with chemical pollution. And microplastics, by nature of their size, because they completely eroded and eroded and eroded, they get really minute. Classical filters are not able to take care of that anymore. But the big one is, in fact, climate change. And climate change for South Africa and Southern Africa means two things. By and large, it means drier, but in some parts of the country and the region, it means wetter. But more importantly, as we are experiencing in this current La Nina cycle, because we went straight from an El Nino cycle, a dry cycle, into a La Nina cycle without a normal in between, we're seeing what the difference in the rainfall patterns are. And this has huge implications for our infrastructure. And one of the later questions is about infrastructure, because our roads, for example, have standards that define them based on a rainfall pattern that is now in our past. We're getting a season's worth of rainfall in a couple of weeks in many parts of the country. And our entire standards and guideline systems has to change in accordance with that. You will know already that because of the intense rainfall, the occurrence of potholes are much more frequent, the erosion of buildings, the development of sinkholes are all huge factors. But a third major global water challenge is, of course, capacity. And there are two kinds of things here. One is classical capacity, where countries like South Africa just don't have enough of. We just don't have enough technicians and technologists and engineers to adequately run our systems. In fact, in the work that is done with a combination of SALGA, MuniIQ, and COCTA, in addition to the surveys that we run, we're finding that the shortage of capacity in the country at municipal level is the worst by far, but is not unique to that level. We're finding the same capacity shortages in many other levels of the system as well. In fact, water services authorities actually form the majority of the municipalities that are classified by COCTA as either being vulnerable or dysfunctional. And this has been shared with the committee before, and we now have updated data in that domain. So capacity is another big building block. And the last one is the value of water. I mean, we're sitting in 2021. The UN theme for water this year, as you experience in this water month and on World Water Day on the 22nd of March, is the value of water. We just do not have a sufficient appreciation for the different dimensions of the value of water. And this is something we all have to work very hard on collectively to bring us into a much more improved space. Then, Chair, on some of the more specific ones from Honorable Moshlala, the impact factor of publications, as a rule of thumb, we as the WRC and our partners are encouraged to do the same, is to publish in high impact factor journals around the world, and we seem to be doing quite well in this domain. South Africa still sits as a research community of practice in the top 20 of the ISI rankings in the water domain. We do have a specific publication that the WRC hosts. It's called Water Essay. It has a 5-year impact factor of 1.2, which is quite good, actually. So it sits well in the ISI domain. On the issue of collaboration with the WITS group, yes, we do, but we also have collaboration on our projects with every single university in this country, every single one, all 26 of them, all of the science councils, many private sector individuals, including SMMEs, and this is something that we will continue to do because this is the model of the WRC. It is a managed network model. On the issue of spatial planning, well, in the light of climate change, one of the things that we have been pushing very, very strongly over the last few years is the notion of water-sensitive design to become one of the central parameters. And already we have gotten involved with some major new developments, and we are pushing the water-sensitive design concept. And there seems to be some measure of uptake. It's very different to work from resources first, as opposed to what conventional development design is. So there are many new competencies required. There's a bit of a mind shift. There is a budgetary factor associated with it in the short term, but the dividends in the long term are absolute. So we're working well in that domain. Honorable Mvana, you said we should pull up our socks on the projects. This is what I think we try to do continuously. Because, I mean, there are two factors around this that are very important. One is that the budget is very small. It's a minuscule budget. And the net result of that is that you are very limited with what you're able to do and how far you can take it. I mean, I look with envy at my international colleagues and the kinds of budgets they're able to work with on what I would think are even less impactful projects than what we do. So we have a very wide range to cover with a very small budget, so that you have to work on the 80-20 principle. You know, you do enough with a 20% injection to have an 80% impact. If you had more, you would be able to do more. So one of our big limitations is that we're unable in many cases. In some cases, we're very successful, but in many cases, we have very good laboratory-based solutions. We can't get it out there and de-risk it sufficiently with a demonstrator or a pilot because they're very expensive to do. A very good example is one of the major initiatives from the TCTA is dealing with acid mine water. And, using high density sludge mechanisms and reverse osmosis is what's being looked at, because the 5 better technologies that are proven at laboratory scale, we don't have enough to take it out there to demonstrate it and de-risk it sufficiently for a TCTA then to use that in the megaliter domain, as opposed to the kiloliter domain where we're forced to work. So this is a major factor. And it again relates to the issue around the raw water tariffs, because that has implications for everyone, including the water research levy. Honorable Sequai, on the issue of how we're dealing with the pollution, there are 3 very important considerations here. One, you will know that the minister has announced that the green drop, in fact, all of the drops are back in the game. In fact, this is now part of the agreement that the ministry has made with the presidency, and we're now moving ahead with that. And this is already underway, run from the Department of Water and Sanitation. But we also know that monitoring has to happen on a real-time basis on a much larger scale, and it does need to take advantage of the toolboxes available from the 4th Industrial Revolution. So one of the concepts that we're working with currently, and we're building the infrastructure around in the WRC, is a water research repository as one of the building blocks of the water observatory that is the grander prize that we want to get to in the next 5 years or so. And I'm sure that the WRC, with its new leadership going into the future, will be able to take this and make this work in a very primary way, because it's absolutely critical that you have a real-time availability of the information associated with the state of water in your neighborhood on both a water quantity basis and a water quality basis to empower the decision-making that needs to happen at that level, either by a municipal official or a particular user or just a member of civil society. It's absolutely critical. So there is a grand plan associated with the Water Observatory. There are many, many steps to go in this, but I think that the end point that will be reached eventually will be exactly the right one for a country like South Africa, and we will deal much more adequately with the issue of pollution. And then the issue of pollution is that we have to enforce the waste discharge charge on polluters. The polluter must pay principle, must not only work as a principle, it has to work in practice. Because the reality is that when some people pollute, all of the rest of society subsidizes how we have to deal with that pollution. And it's grossly unfair. I mean, we have an obligation in terms of the National Water Act on how we act as users, and we have to keep people honest to that. But on the emerging pollution, this is much more complicated because you have to work out standards around this, you need a lot of research, and then you need to find the right kind of mechanisms on how to deal with it. And it's not so easy. So with microplastics as an example, we haven't yet in this country got a ban on products that you and I use every single day that contains microplastics that gets into our river systems. Because people only associate these kinds of things with larger things they can see, like plastic bags. But every morning you brush your teeth with a brand of toothpaste, which I can almost guarantee you now contains microbeads. And those microbeads are actually microplastics that are largely non-degradable, that goes directly into the water system. And this is stuff that we have to deal with. We have to deal with the right kinds of standards, the right kinds of guidelines on how we engage this from a legal perspective. Then, Honorable Squire, you asked a very important question in a very interesting way around the discrimination against young people. And honestly, I like the way you phrased it. Because in the way, the major part of the activities in the country's strategy as a whole is that we're not embracing sufficiently the plight and the futures of the young people in this country. So I gave you a statistic, for example, around the young researchers in the WRC portfolio. I can tell you that's fairly unique in the research world. This is not replicated in the other agencies. It's not replicated in the universities. And I think it can be. It requires will. But in addition to that, you know, we got to develop the researchers, but they're a small group. We will assist the postgraduate students. We had 362 in this year that we're talking about, and our general targets is between 400 and 500 in a good year. it's still a small group. We have to go way beyond that. And we have to deal with difficult things like what do you do with unemployed graduates and trying to get them into the system. So I can tell you, and this doesn't relate to the 2019 year, this is current, that we have a graduate employment program as part of the presidential program in general to deal with the issues of youth. And this graduate employment program, which is happening together with the Department of Science and Innovation, is underway currently. There is a workshop that's happening right now as you and I speak. In addition to that, we have today, as we speak, a workshop running with the young agricultural leaders around capacitating them around the future of agriculture, because we don't want to bring young people in to do the same things that our fathers and our grandfathers did. We want to do the things that the future girl child does and the future woman farmer does in a way that is much more innovative than where we are now. And so we are moving in this kind of domain. But we also have to deal with what is happening in the schools. And, you know, Honorable Constance Siposengwa also raised this issue, is that one is that you got to make the schools a safe place for people to go to in every possible respect. And the sanitation program has the possibility, the SAFE program has the possibility of turning that on its head. In fact, when we had our event opening up a new toilet system in one of the schools in Khagiso, attending that was Dr. Dulai Kone from the Gates Foundation, and he said he found that so inspirational that they're willing to up the grant around making more of the technologies available for us to do this at a larger scale in the South African environment, and this is something that we're currently busy doing. But on the greening of the schools, one is about the food gardens and dealing with the nutritional security issue, both in the schools as well as the communities around them. And the pilots that we're running now and the guidelines that we produced from that is now allowing the Department of Basic Education to have a manual that now can be used to replicate this in every single school in the country if they want to. And we've given it to them. Say, this is the way you can do it. We will be there continuously helping to support that. But the second thing that we're doing around that as a water agency is we're making sure that these new systems are water-wise. So in those schools, we have water tanks to do rainwater harvesting, but we're also putting in boreholes to have a sustainable source of water in those domains. And this is something that can be replicated in many, many other places. Then the last thing I want to talk to around the young people is that we want to organize to build people not only for future academics, not only to be professionals inside the water sector working in public institutions like municipalities and the National Department and the water utilities and the WRC, but we also want them to be a major part of the industrialization of the water sector, to build the new private sector in water, not around privatizing water, but organizing to develop services, organizing to have products that are bought locally as part of the localization program, and to give vent to the new innovations and the new technologies that are possible. So we have a series of programs in the WRC that are bearing fruit, like SASTEP and like WADA, that are working to organize, to take good ideas from people and develop those ideas into real products and services to a high technology readiness level so they can start hitting the market in significant ways. Some of the stuff that we do is finding an international audience. I mean, just last week, I was part of the Water Day celebrations with a group in Massachusetts, in the Massachusetts Water Forum, and 4 senators and 2 House of Representatives individuals were on that forum, and they were looking at young innovators, and 2 of those innovators came from South Africa, came from the WRC portfolio. And now they're looking at possibilities of having uptake in the United States and maybe elsewhere in the world. This is a wonderful thing to do. We also partner with Green Matters and Sanbi around the Imbilisi Green Innovation Program, because we believe strongly that, you know, you want innovators in every possible space. You want the young people to be dominant in this space as far as you possibly can, but you want it to be green as well. And so these green innovators hopefully will start making a big mark both in the local environment and in the international environment. And as the minister and the deputy minister have been saying on many, many fora, we really need to utilize the preferential procurement mechanisms that are already allowed in law to give these people a chance to organize for a much better playing field for all of our people. And not enough of that is happening. Then the other question came around the general assessment and improvements needed. Well, for the WRC, I think the WRC does pretty well, but the areas that we want to improve on very strongly is the valorization model around taking that great knowledge, the products and services that are starting to come about out of our laboratories and organize for that to be in the market, in the industrialization space on the back of the IPAP ideals, because South Africa doesn't only want to produce for South Africa. It shouldn't. South Africa should take advantage of things like the African Free Trade Area. South Africa should take advantage of the globalization of the market. South Africa should take advantage of the fact that we are a water scarce country. And because we are a water scarce country, the innovations that we need just to survive from day to day are marketable products that will improve water efficiency everywhere in the world, in every single corner of the world. And this is what we really want to do. We want to organize for that valorization model to start capturing that kind of space as well. And this is one of the things that we would really like to work on a lot more. And hopefully we'll get the kinds of budgets and the kinds of partnerships that will help us to do that in that kind of way. Then lastly, Chairperson Semenya, the questions that you had asked, let me first talk to the acid mine water issue and say that what I had mentioned before around these other technologies being available and possibly could be used by places like the TCTA needing that demonstrator work is something that we are working on. And we're trying to find a space where we could start making those decisions. Because by the time you're working at the scale that Percy's team is working at, the technology reliability has to have been worked out absolutely. There's no room for error in that. So that space in between the laboratory and that point is the space that we really want to ramp up our activities on. And things like the Water Innovation Company, which sits in the new business plan of the WRC, which I'm sure the new WRC leadership will take forward, is going to fill that kind of space. But Chairperson, the one specific question that you asked about the WRC was the amendment bill. The amendment bill had a difficult ride in previous discussions. And there's a lot of analysis that may need to be done about why and how. But where we're sitting now is that we have, as the WRC, updated that 2013 amendment bill draft. That amendment bill draft, the version that we have with the improvements, has been submitted to the advisory committee of the minister. It has also been given to the acting DG at the time when we submitted it, which is Trevor Balzer. And now it's for the department and the ministry to take that forward. Our own belief is that it is in a ready enough state, the updated version, to be able to be dealt with by Parliament in a fairly rapid timeframe, I think. And maybe we'll be able to, in this 50th year of the WRC, because WRC is 50 in 2021, finally get an updated Amendment Act that we quite badly need. Chairperson, thank you very much. I will pause at this point.
Thank you very much. The second presenters.
Thank you, Chairperson. I hope I'm audible. I will start with the questions in the order that they came. I think the first questions came from Honorable Mohlala. The first one was, how does TCTA envisage its role in the, what I would call the agency? It's a difficult question to answer at this particular point in time, but I'll go through the process in terms of where we are, and hopefully that would make sense, because the minister has not necessarily pronounced yet on the adoption of the work that has been done in terms of what has been proposed. But to answer the question directly, TCTA, it's one of the institutions that would be directly affected by the formation of the agency and the proposal that is currently under review. And when I say that, it has been a proposal that has been put together by all the affected parties, the department, the relevant portions of the department, TCTA. There's been also engagement with Treasury and also with the advisors to the minister in terms of this. But I know this is still en route to the minister for the minister to make a final call. But the way as TCTA we envisage is we look at ourselves as some of the institutions that are central to the formation of the agency, because ultimately the agency will have to still go into the market to borrow money. They'll still have to do projects, raise funding, and also do project management for those mega projects. And we are the institution that has been set up to do exactly that. And why we need to be at the center of this whole program is because part of what we need to do, the funders are people that are quite opposed to changes, many changes that happen in the sector, because if they give you money, they give you money on the strength of how you are set up and how you operate. They will do their due diligence and make their decisions on that basis. Now, if there are major changes, they start worrying whether their money is still safe or whether the due diligence that they've decided to take the risk on you as an organization, whether it's still the same. So part of what we need to do as TCTA is to still give comfort to the funders that their money is still in safe hands and it won't be affected by any of the changes that would be happening. But on the other side, it's now ensuring that structures like TCTA and what they call the water trading entity would now be the first to go in terms of the formation of the agency. And for the first 2 years in terms of the proposal, and I'm saying proposal, TCTA will be what they call a proto agency, because the whole activity will be revolving around TCTA in terms of what needs to happen. And then I think in the third year, because I think the president has given 36 months for the setting up of the agency, that's when now all the other things will come into play in terms of the agency being properly formed, the new board, the new chief executive, and whatever structures that needs to come in place. So, but before that happens, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, especially in terms of answering the question, what is it that's different that the agency is going to bring? Is it just an amalgamation of different functions, or is the country going to see added benefit by going that route? I think that's the work that we currently doing at this particular point in time. But the proposal that, as far as I know, is sitting in front of the minister is the one that suggests TCTA sitting at the center in the first 2 years to actually pull this together, because the skill sets do sit at TCTA and the department in terms of the work that we need to do. So hopefully then once the minister has given her go ahead, then everything will be clearer in terms of how we need to work with that. I hope that answers the question. The second issue is on the amount owed by the department. Because we are talking about the year 1920, I would say our preference would have been that by 31st March last year, we had all outstanding debt paid, but there were some other issues that the department had to deal with. But I'm happy to say that there has been improvement in terms of the repayment period by the department, such that by May 2020, all the outstanding debt was paid, except for one issue that I think will still be with us for some time. Because of the delayed payments beforehand, there has been an accumulation of interest on outstanding debt, but that has just been sitting there and not being paid. And this is a matter that we plan to engage with the department, especially the acting DG, on how we deal with this, because as long as there isn't payment that is done on time, that attracts interest. And some of our customers are starting to ask that if they are paying their money to the department or to the water boards on time, why is it that there is that amount? And hopefully this won't be passed through the tariffs when it becomes due. So this will become a problem in the long term if one looks at when the term comes to an end of any loan or any bond that we need to now that matures, because we will be left with that amount. But I have written to the acting DG to say we need to have a discussion on this and see how we can work with that. The good thing is I've seen a lot of improvement in terms of the payment levels from the department. So I'm hoping that we'll be able to deal with that. The third issue is on the shortage of engineers. This one, you can look at it from so many different sides. I would like to say, Chair, that we don't necessarily have that big a shortage of engineers. It's just that water infrastructure by nature, you won't find in metropolitan areas and all that. It's always out there in the rural areas where there's not a lot of civilization. And unfortunately, for some of our more learned people, they prefer to work in towns and in metropolitan areas. And that gets to be a problem to get people on site. The real example is the one where we're talking about Lesotho Highlands Water Project. Part of the discussions that happened between us, the department, and also our counterparts across has been, how do we take advantage of projects like the Lesotho Highlands Water Project? This is one big project that has space for exposure and knowledge by our upcoming engineers. But we'll always have a problem where if you want to post people in Lesotho, there's always a problem where people say, no, but I would want to work in South Africa. I don't want to work in Lesotho. So it's a problem that I think is beyond TCTA, but we and the department have been sitting down to try and address it, and also up our communication and marketing space by talking to institutions of higher learning to make sure that we can have a lot of people that take advantage of this, because projects like this do not come around every 5 years or so. These are long-term projects, and the skill sets that can be picked up from there and the experience you can't find anywhere. So it's one thing that we are working on at this stage, because if I look at the number of people in the water sector, so many of them have actually been trained with the first phase of Lesotho Highlands Water Project. But I think there has been this growth where people have actually not been doing that. I think other part of the question would now be, there is a slow but steady increase in the female engineers, which we need to now be looking at improving. And I think the other colleagues have actually touched on that in terms of where are we putting our bases and what are we supporting in terms of that. But it is work that all of us have to come and deal with. But the major problem has been that people do not want to work where water infrastructure usually is. The PICC role, the TCTA role, I think in the presentation, I did talk about coordination. What sits under the PICC, it's not something that has a structure that looks at all projects all the time, because the nature of the projects are that they are so dynamic and so big that you do not get the department that's responsible or hosting that being able to deal with the issues. You'd find that in especially SIP 18 is primarily water infrastructure projects that are now part of the SIPs. So it makes sense to have an organization that works within the water space, and also that deals with that kind of projects in terms of what we do. I mean, it's our primary function to do project management and program management. But part of what we do within that, it's with the SIP 3 as well. And there's a lot of analysis that we do. There's a lot of checking whether some of the departments that submit their projects, whether they make sense, or to actually inquire on the validity or check the strength of the arguments that have been made there. But in the main is to, once decisions have been made, to coordinate the input that comes, to analyze that input as well, and to pull together the presentations that would have to be done. But from time to time, the objectivity that comes with TCTA not being part of some of the projects that they run allows the people from TCTA that deals with those projects to be able to assist with the assessment of the business cases as they come through. And a lot really relies on the skill sets that sit within TCTA on the basis of the nature of the business that we do. There was still a question from Memushala that talked about what kind of advice can we give on the functionality and viability, looking at the total value chain. I would say, and I think a lot has been said also by Desigan from WRC, where we really need to look. I mean, we have always been talking about South Africa being a water scarce country, but if you look at the quality of our infrastructure, and it's unfortunately, if you look at the value chain, we are looking only at the mega infrastructure. Then there's water boards, and then it moves out of water and sanitation and moves into COCTA, where you have municipalities. And you have to look after that total value chain to ensure that the quality of the infrastructure remains in line with what needs to happen. And I think also the presentation that was done by WRC also talked about the fact that the sanitation part of, we all know that there were new houses that were built. We know that water boards were there to look at water infrastructure in terms of what needs to happen. But sanitation has been left behind. And what that has done, it's really increased the whole issue of what happens to the quality of water, because a lot ends up back in our rivers and we don't need it there. And I know Chair actually asked that question to say dams are polluted, and you'd find that that is more on the municipal side, where they are actually supposed to do certain functions. So it's a good decision that the minister has made, that the blue and green drop needs to come back, because that would help the department to monitor that. But I think in terms of the proverbial reuse, recycle, it's quite important for us as South Africa to consider that. But what's more important is the payment for services, because I would say that there is a solution for all our water problems. It's just the issue of how much are we prepared to pay for that. And I think if we are able to deal with that issue, we'll go a long way in terms of ensuring that the viability of the value chain is kept intact. Perhaps my last issue on that would be, we take too long, even with the projects that we do, starting from feasibility to the time we get approvals, especially the ones for borrowing limits and guarantees. If we can get assistance in terms of shortening that, it will make sure that we still have feasibility studies that make sense. The cost structures won't be that different, because sometimes it takes us over 5 years where a feasibility was done for a project until we can actually do that project. And those figures ultimately do not mean much if you go into the market to try and raise money. But we struggle so much with all the approvals that we need to get, although everybody understands that these projects need to be done. If we can deal with that aspect, I think it can go a long way. And I think this is some of the areas where we would really appreciate the help that can come from the portfolio committee as well. And I think the formation of the agency in terms of how that's gonna finally work will help, because some of the functions that are separated now will be under one roof, and it will go a long way in terms of ensuring that even duplication is actually taken out, and will also actually divert the money to where it was intended. It won't actually go to other areas. And I hope that answers the question. There was from member Mvana, there was an issue of management of debt, and the other issue was fundraising for the 64 billion that we talked about. I think we are partly in luck, although it doesn't augur well for the whole value chain, because our primary debtor in this case will be the department. We raise the funding on behalf of the department. They sell the water once the water is available. They sell it to the water boards. The water boards sell it to the municipality, who then sell it to the end users. And the payment comes back that way. But the agreements that we have, it's that should not enough money be collected by the department has to now stand surety for making sure that we will get paid when as and when required. And also, if we get these guarantees, if they are express guarantees, like for the VRS, for the Val River scheme, it's necessary that the state will stand surety that we get paid. But I think if all of us were doing what we need to do, we would actually be managing this better in terms of where we are. But I think it's an area that where all of us need to work together. And what's worrying now has been the condition of what's happening within the municipality space, because now if they are not able to collect money, they cannot, or bill and collect money, they cannot pay water boards, who cannot pay the department, who cannot pay us. And we understand how that's going to have a ripple effect across the value chain in terms of what needs to happen. And it moves to the second issue of raising the 64 billion, because whoever needs to give us money, they actually look at this value chain and analyze it. And in most cases, they'll always complain about the fact that they think there's a deterioration in terms of the ability of municipality to pay water boards. And we need to understand how that fits into the bigger picture. And also this issue that we mentioned, I know it's a sensitive one of the tariffs, but unless we can get to levy tariffs in line with our models, We'll always have a problem where somebody says, how do I borrow you money and you tell me this is how you're going to get it back? But somewhere along the lines, there are other decisions that get made that disturb this. How are you sure that in the following year, you'll be able to claw back what you've lost when there were zero tariff increments? Because in the main, it affects our ability now to collect money so that we can settle the debt that we have. And also during the period, be able to service the debt as it accrues. So primarily what I'm saying is the nature of what we do and the kind of relationships that we have with the markets has made it easier for us to access the markets. But the only problem now is the conditions that the markets are putting on us, which Treasury has some problem with, because all our projects are shovel ready. And I think even in terms of the question that I will answer later by the chairperson, in terms of access to funds by the ones that have been made available by the presidency, all of these things need to go through a Treasury. Now, we do have direct relationships with some of the banks, both in the country and outside, but all of them are now saying, because of the nature and state of the economy, it's a bit difficult and they want more guarantees and they are tightening their requirements in terms of their rules. And the problem now becomes, it's going to be a big problem unless the state as itself and all the SOEs are able to perform in a particular manner. Because one particular example that is quite relevant, it's where they say they want all state entities that now rely on the fiscus in terms of guarantees. If one does not actually perform in line with the covenants from a point of view of the agreements that have been signed, they would want all their money in the other state entities to actually get acceleration so that they can get paid better or faster in terms of that, because they regard South Africa as a risk in that way. So it's important for us to ensure that we never get to that point. The question that was asked by Ms. Oposing, I think Members Oposing was clear in terms of the school greening project, which leaves us talking about the performance rating and what do we need to do better. In my view, I would say dealing with audit findings and making sure that we can deal with the consequence management and put that at rest, because that would deal with a whole lot of things that are making the portfolio committee and the AG quite nervous as well, and it makes sense. The second one is on the raising of funding.
Who's that? Who's calling me? Proceed, CEO.
Thank you, Chair. And then the last one, Chair, came from you. I think I've addressed the issue of the PICC. And the second one was the access to funds that are coming from the president or the presidency. The problem with these are they still need to get concurrence from Treasury. We have to work with Treasury for any funds that are being made available. For now, our projects are actually at the top. I think there are about 4 TCTA projects that have ticked all the boxes in terms of what the president has said. But we're working with Treasury to actually see if we're able to go into the market and borrow money. That makes a lot of money available for other entities that can use it. But the decision does not necessarily sit with us, but we do make applications for all of these things, and the decision will come from the Ministry of Finance in terms of whether we can get access to those funds or not. But we have been engaging with them to say, if our projects do qualify, they need to look at that, and the sooner we get the money, the better, because if we get this kind of funding and we don't have to repay the money, it makes the cost of water cheaper rather than expensive. The last one is the question on AMD. As a special purpose vehicle, we have to do what the minister directs us to do via a directive. Now, for now, the minister has given us a directive on looking at the source, which would now be the mine tailings. That's where we're operating. And we know that some of these things have been with us for some time because government made a decision that they will not chase some of the mines that have been closed, which is the reason why we are where we are, because some of them are 80 years old and more, and the money has been repatriated out of the country in terms of that. But that's an argument for another day. So for now, we're looking at ensuring that there's no more decant, which is the first part. But there are other state institutions that deal with the part that deals with the dam itself. I think it's a function of how everything has been subdivided. There's work for the water boards, but primarily the majority of the work sits with the municipalities because these things are happening in their space. But where it's a problem where they cannot sort this thing out, for us, we can only come in if the minister expressly gives us a directive that this is what we ought to do. So this is how it works. And probably the last issue I see I wrote here, even still on the shortage of engineers. We do have engineers, like I said, that are not necessarily in short supply, but we need to make sure that we don't only focus on engineers. I think within the water space, there's a lot more requirements for technicians and process controllers. If you look at what happens down the chain, yes, there is a requirement for engineers, but we also have to make sure that we stratify that. That's why some of the programs that have been run, and the fact that even the department has its own academy, and I think there's a few water institutions that have their academy. So we are starting to try to work together to actually see how do we alleviate that. Chair, I believe I have attempted to respond to all the questions as asked. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Inkomati-Usuthu.
You're on mute.
Oh, sorry, Chair. We are going to respond, Chair, to the questions that have been raised, in particular around our ability to assist on the CSI. But to confirm, Honorable Mahlala, that the presentation that we have made here will be made available to members so that then they can have access to it. But generally, Chair, we are going to indicate that the CSI project is an annual project that we normally have. We are, and members have spoken to the issue of the scarcity of water within our environment, and the Inkomati-Usuthu is also settled with those issues of water scarcity. So on an annual basis, we do conduct investigations to see which of the communities within our catchment area are in dire need of that intervention, and then we try and make those necessary interventions. The project that we have done in Jerusalem was done as an outcome of that particular exercise. We are going to look into those areas of Hlalagahle, Duduma, and Kamachegeza, Honorable Mhlala, and make sure that an investigation and an assessment is done so that then the needs of those communities are also looked at. But generally, in the whole catchment, the issue of water scarcity remains one of the critical challenges, and that's why we are now piloting the investigations into the groundwater resources, as another member has pointed out, that the surface water has been an obsession for us for a long time, and yet we do have those groundwater reserves, and we're saying maybe it's time that we begin to do those investigations and see if we cannot assist our communities with those. Chairperson, you've asked about the gender spread in terms of the employment opportunities that we have created during the period under review. We can report here that of the 24 that we have reported here, 13 are female and 11 are males. And also in terms of the external bursaries that we have issued, 3 were males and 2 were females. But I will indicate in terms of also the training opportunities that we have also given to staff, that of the 56, is it 46 that were trained in the period, 24 were female and 22 were males. Chair, there was a question raised by Honorable Mbana around the surplus, and I would like to request the CFO to just address us on that one. The historical inequalities that was also raised by Honorable Stry. I'll request Dr. Saunyama just to speak to us about that particular question. Chair, thank you.
We're waiting.
Chairperson, it seems that she was on mute, but she's here now.
Thank you, CE. Thank you, Chair. Apologies for that. I was actually halfway to the response already. Okay. In terms of the rollover funds that were disclosed in the financial statements, in accordance with the National Treasury Circulation, commitments and liabilities, we can retain them and deduct this from the surplus funds, and they came up to 11 million. So we retained 11 million to cater for the disclosures according to the financial statements. The balance remaining for that, the entity sent a request to National Treasury on the 31st of September to request to retain these funds. We subsequently received an approval on the 31st of, on the 28th of October from the DDG of Public Finance. So these surplus funds were then approved to be rolled over into the current financial year. So they have formed part of our budget for this year. In terms of the allocations, we have allocated spend towards acquisition of office space, as well as projects within the water resource management that were earmarked and aligned to the outcomes of the entity. In addition, we increased our operation costs to support our responsiveness to COVID-19, which entailed increasing our allocation for cleaning services, PPE, and telecommunication charges, because now some of our staff members are working remotely now. So that is how we have allocated the surplus funds as inquired. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to respond with regard to the issue of inequality in terms of water allocation, especially for the disadvantaged. Just to say that in terms of scale, from 0 to 5, I think we would put ourselves on number 3, and I'll explain the reasons. One of the, in terms of performance, what we've done as an institution is that we've just get to finalize our catchment management strategy, and we have got in the strategy priorities that we have given as an institution. One of it is the development of water allocation plans within the catchment. And to date, what we have done is that we updated the hydrology within the water management area. And we've also embarked on some work together with the Water Research Commission on understanding the water use efficiency of the crops which are within our area, because it will help us when we want to look at things of reallocating water, because when water was allocated, it was based on the crops with certain water use efficiency. So we are busy with that study. The other thing which we've done is to mandate ourselves on the processing of water use authorization. And what we've done is that we are prioritizing the issuing of water use license for HDIs and assisting them. We've got a project that we've earmarked to assist the HDIs, especially with developing internal capacity within the organization, to make sure that those reports, which makes it difficult for HDIs to apply for water use licenses, we are going to we assist them internally, especially your water resources reports and geology reports, and also the other item we've looked at is to finalize the VNV projects for the Usuthu and Inkomati in our area, which are sitting at about 60%, and then we dedicated a division, data and information, that is going to look specifically to address this issue, VNV, to make sure that we are in a space whereby we are able to develop allocation plans for our area. And once we've done that, we want to make sure that we revise our water allocation reform strategy once the VNV is complete. And as you know, that we have got ongoing assignments to make sure there's transformation of irrigation boards. We have started with the consultations, and so far it's progressing well. So we are looking forward for these priorities to be part of our mandate, to make sure that we are able to be in a position to set aside water, especially to support those who are historically disadvantaged. But also just to say that we have done an MOU between the University of Mpumalanga, which is here, and IUCMA, and we're also looking at alternative sources of water to support the small-scale irrigation farmers, you know. And what we have done is that we are going to implement rainwater harvesting techniques with the university and also with the Department of Water and Sanitation through our MOU, which we have established between the institutions. So these are some of the things and priorities that we have looked at to make sure that we improve in terms of us addressing the issue of making sure that there's equality in terms of water. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Chair. I believe we've been able to respond to some of the issues. In terms of the one around the employment opportunities, we've indicated that we continue to be an institution which is having a more bias towards women. That's why when you look at our total number right now of the 91 employees that we have got a larger percentage of those being women, and we continue to make sure that they are not only appointed, but they are also given the training opportunities to make sure that they excel in the spaces where they are appointed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, CEO, Department, and the DM.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm going to request that we allow the team led by the COO, Basin, to respond. But the first person to respond will be Mayor Togosigwaza that works with these institutions, especially on the issue that are being raised, and followed by the other colleagues. Then I will come at the end, Your Excellency Chairperson. Thank you. Ntabiseng and the team, we can start with Togo.
Yes, DM. Thank you, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Thank you very much. I will address only the issues related to the raised by Honorable Tseki and the Chairperson around the issue of delegations in terms of Schedule 3. I think, Chairperson, you are correct that we have delayed in terms of delegating the functions as listed in the Schedule 3 of the National Water Act. I think those are the powers that the executive authority can assign or delegate to the Catchment Management Agency. Chairperson, I think we must admit that it took longer because decentralization of functions takes long, because we need to ensure that we incrementally delegate the functions to the Catchment Management Agency. We are now at a stage where, as the department, we have analyzed all the functions that need to be delegated, and the executive authority is applying herself on those delegations. Of course, the delegations are also based on performance, and we have seen that all the CMAs are now at a stage where they are ready to receive the delegations. Chairperson, around the issue of the expiry of date of the Chief Executive Authority, it's another issue, Chair, that we should apologize. We knew that it was, as Honorable Teki said, that it was expiring in 2020, but it took a long time for us to apply our mind or to advise the minister to request the board to move into that issue. But currently the minister is also applying her mind on that issue. And we have requested, the CMA has written to minister requesting that she approves so that they can proceed with the advert of the chief executive. Chairperson, in general, I think the entities performed well, and we are satisfied with the service delivery and also the financial outcomes. Thank you, DM. I will end there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and members. Colleagues, I think the Sistoko has captured all the issues. Just to add and indicate that indeed we are working hand in hand with the entities to ensure that we meet all our obligations. And on the issue of the Lesotho, yes, indeed we'll make sure as a department to ensure that we close all the gaps and all the issues that were raised from the previous audit outcomes. I think, Chair, on that note, I would like to thank you and thank the entities for the sterling work that it's doing for us as a sector. Thank you, Chair.
DM.
Well, thank you very much, Chairperson. Firstly, Chairperson, just to thank you and the portfolio committee that you allowed us to come with our entities. It's work in progress, and we want to commend them for good performance. But as we have said, like the AG has said, we have not arrived where we want to be. We still want to demand clean audit. Therefore, the leadership of the Water Research Commission, they can go back to clean audit, and we want to thank Dr. Mjoli and Des again and the team, and the work that they are doing on the issues we are raising, because they are an important repository of information, and they are on a cutting edge in terms of issues that we want to actually look at as new solutions in dealing with the problems that are there. And like the issues of pollution, we are very pleased that they are very alive, that there are new entrants or pollutants that are coming into the system, looking at the manufacturing capability that is happening in the country, and whether is it in the medical field, whether is it agriculture and so forth. And it helps us a lot to look at that, and including looking at all some of these issues that we are raising around the matters of acid mine drainage. Because remember, South Africa remain one of the mining capitals. and in as much as were endowed with mineral endowment, but the impact on water, and including not only on water, including the impact on soil and the impact on air we breathe, is going to be very important. That's why that kind of an assessment and research, including the technologies, because we need to be able to apply technologies that are there. In your water mix, one of the things that we say, groundwater will be very important, but at the very same time, seawater will be important, and your surface water. But the issue of reuse is an important thing, because water will always be available. But the question whether the water that we have is fit for use is going to be one of the important issues we look at. Therefore, we want to thank the Water Research Commission, and the information is readily available to share with members, and the role they play within the region and SADC as a leader, including in our continent and international. The TCTA team, led by Dr. Dumas, who's our chair, and the CEO, Comrade Basin, they are one of the most important instruments that the country has. If we are going to achieve the benefits of equity and justice around the question of access to water and access to benefits associated with water, TCTA has demonstrated that it has the ability to get into the markets without these difficulties where the public service itself cannot be in a position to do some of those things. And they will need our support. And we are very pleased that one of the things when the president looking at putting infrastructure as at the center of economic recovery and reconstruction, water is at the apex. The same thing with energy or power generation, telecommunication, and transport. We are actually looking at the expertise that we've been able to mobilize through TCTA, that they will become the nucleus of the new agents that the president demands that we need to put. And we have said before, is not going to be new work. We'll be able to refine the old work that we had already done, looking at the construction unit and the trading entity, so that we can have the ability to go to the markets. And TCTA has gone to the markets, and they have a good reputation, including the issues of rating agencies. And we should be able to handle the TCTA with care, while we are handling TCTA with care, but we'll never compromise on issues of transformation and the issues that we need to deliver in terms of excellence. But as we said before, Chair, we will come back. We'll have that discussion, like we said before, with regard to the National Water Resource Infrastructure Agency, when the department, treasury, and others in the sector, including your wise input, because you are an important component to be engaged as legislatures, including the executive. Well, the issues around water tariffs, I heard your excellencies were asking about them. And we've discussed this matter. Probably at a particular point in time, you'll have to reconvene us. We'll have to come back and discuss the issue of, there are two aspects. One is the issue of the independent economic regulator, which is an important policy decision we have taken, and part of the reforms, structural reforms, would have to be able to separate the issue of being a referendum player, which is policy making, and the issues of regulation. But then the other element is that the other round to discuss the tariffs, like it's an important issue by the time they get to be concluded, because we still have to be able to make those determinations, the minister, in terms of the law of the water use charges that must be concluded. Lastly, we just have to thank the team, chairperson from Inkomati-Usuthu CMA, led by Umpelo Ushabang and the team. They've managed to keep the fort, despite the setbacks of two board members passing on. And we still convey our condolences on behalf of the ministry. and our president. And also will work on the issues with the department to ensure that the positions are filled and we stabilize the administration, that the board there should be able then to conclude the issue of filling the position of the CFO, the CEO and the CFO. But they've done well, and the issues of delegations, they've taken time. But as Togo has said, the issues of institutional reform, whether is it regional water utilities, whether it's the national water resource infrastructure agencies, whether are the CMAs, we are proceeding with them now. We're at a stage where we are ready, and delegations will always be given from time to time and be reviewed on the basis of the capacity that exists, because you also don't want to be throwing functions or throwing directives on institutions that are not equipped, both financially but also with human capital, to be able to discharge that work. I thought, Your Excellencies, honorable members, I should be able to make that kind of an input, just welcoming your guidance, because the achievements of these institutions will not have been possible if on an ongoing basis, Chair, we have never insisted that they must come. They've always been coming here, sharing their work, but also accounting in terms of the plans that you approved. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, DM. Honorable members, if there is any other follow-up, members are welcome to follow up. Thank you very much. There is no follow-up, and thank you very much to the chairs of entities and CEOs and the department and the DM. Thank you very much. We want to employ on the entities to say that you've done a good job. Please stay there or proceed. Make sure that we get clean audit, but clean audit without service delivery is something else. We need to make sure that we use our finances correctly, but at the same time deliver in terms of our mandate, and make sure that our people are get quality services, and they are able to access water, and the the constitutional obligation that government has in terms of progressively making sure that our people access water, and the issue that has been raised by Water Research Commission, I think it's very important that we will have to support them in terms of making sure that how do we use how do we reuse water, particularly because we are a scarce country in terms of water. And thank you very much. The meeting is adjourned, and as we adjourn, honorable members, towards the end of April, will then request members again taking your time to come back and look at the board annual reports, water board's annual report, so that when we start in May, we don't have a pressure of work. Thank you very much, honorable members. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Tot ziens. Mooi blij.
Two, 3 drinks. Masabo.
Hi, Honorable Mashiko.
Okay,
Yes,
mkhoto.
Mfonele Mashiko masiqedile.
Sewena kae?
Ngikaba kwile mana kutswani ni. Ralekaleka.
Happy Easter weekend to everyone.
Yes,
Happy Easter to everyone. You too.
Sister yaphila.
Ngumvana man, Sispem one.
Oh, ngithi now right msisimbani kahle.
Kahle uyiphi. Nidle kahle Easter man, niziphathe kahle.
Yeah,
Now usiphathe kahle.
Mkhoto.
Hello.
Itla mapula neng ke tlabile ke tlo go tlabela kgomo.
Ai ke atla ke tlene.
Go tlogela ka le go fitla Monday otle.
Ai ke na le wena wa tseba ke eng ke mo tseleng. Re tla bua re ska bua ditaba tsa rona mo gara batho.
Ba matlo ba tla galla.
Bye.
Ciao.